Chapter 855. The young master of levitating goat Peak swayed from side to side with his huge belly. Every time it swayed, the group of demons could even hear the sound of metal scraping against metal coming from its stomach. After consuming the final blood sea badge, the young master of levitating goat Peak could not hold it in any longer and sped towards the forest in a flash. The demons clutched their stomachs and the muscles on their faces cramped. After the first round, it was time for the fight for the final 10 spots. The rules of the fight were simple. The 100 fiend demons that obtained the blood sea badges were split into 10 groups. Each group had 10 fiend demons and they would face off in pairs on their respective arenas. For the first round, 5 fiend demons would remain on each of the 10 arenas and they would enter the next round. For the second round, 1 fiend demon would be eliminated from each arena and the remaining 4 would face off in pairs with 2 winners. For the third round, 1 fiend demon would be eliminated and the remaining 2 fiend demons would face off in pairs with 1 winner. For the fourth round, 2 fiend demons would remain on each arena and the final victor would be determined. The 10 fiend demons from the 10 arenas would enter the 1,000-year blood sea to cultivate. The 7 overlords stood in midair and exchanged glances before striking at almost the same time. Dermic powers surged and the wind and rain changed. On the flat ground beside the blood sea, mud churned and gathered continuously, forming gigantic arenas one after another. High-level fiend demons could already change the terrain with the use of their dermic powers. Before long, the 10 arenas were constructed. Right then, the young master of levitating goat Peak flew back from afar. When he landed on the ground, he staggered and his gait was much weirder as well. The young master of levitating goat Peak walked extremely slowly and raised his buttocks slightly. Each time he swayed, he would gasp. "What's wrong with him?" Little Fox was puzzled and asked curiously. Monkey burst into laughter. "He can't digest so many blood sea badges in his stomach and he'll definitely vomit and have diarrhea. However, it's not easy to expel such a huge pile of badges," Linghu continued. "Ah, so disgusting." Little Fox pretended to vomit. Linghu snickered sinisterly. "Look at his gait. He must have pooped quite a bit. How are you feeling?" The overlord of levitating goat Peak asked with a frown. "I'm fine. I can still fight." The moment the young master of levitating goat Peak said that, he realized that his throat was already hoarse. All the demons snickered. Everyone could tell that even if the young master of levitating goat Peak did not suffer much damage after swallowing that pile of blood sea badges, it was torturous for him. The 10 overlords were divided into groups. Nominally, the overlords of levitating goat Peak to the 7. However, the 7 overlords had a tacit understanding that they would split their strongest subordinates with their opponent's strongest subordinates in order to prevent both sides from suffering heavy losses. Apart from him, the young master of levitating goat Peak, the silver-robed man from Silvermoon Valley and the woman in makeup from Thousand Snake Island were not in his group. The overlords seemed to be wary of Su Zimo's strength as well. In the first round, Su Zimo's opponent was a bull demon from Golden Flames Mountain. "Brother Mo, I saw you fight 3 days ago. I'm afraid I'm not a match for you given my strength," the bull demon cupped his fists. "However, it's a rare opportunity to cultivate in the blood sea. I can't possibly back down without a fight and have to give it my all. Please." Golden Flames Mountain and Ape Chatter Ridge had always been on good terms and the bull demon did not display any enmity. "Brother Bull, please." Su Zimo cupped his fists gently and nodded with a smile as well. There were not many rules for the competition except for the fact that essence spirits were prohibited. Firstly, the essence spirits were already tested in the first trial. Secondly, it was way too dangerous for essence spirits to fight. In the past, paragons and fiend demons of 2 territories fought to the death with their essence spirits. In the end, both parties were severely injured and both fiend demons died one after another without making it through. Rumble. Boom. The bull demon reverted to his true form and burned with golden flames in a majestic manner. He charged towards Su Zimo with thunderous hooves. Not only did the bull demon of Golden Flames Mountain have a strong physique, the surface of his body burned with golden flames and was extremely powerful. Although the bull demon expressed weakness verbally, he was still indignant internally. He was a mid-level fiend demon after all. He wanted to compete with Su Zimo in terms of physical strength just because he was a major cultivation realm higher. Su Zimo did not move at all. When the bull demon arrived before him, he finally reached out slowly and placed his palm gently on the bull demon's head. Piak! He pressed his palm down. The bull demon's charge came to a stop. The bull demon's eyes widened in disbelief as he looked at the seemingly weak figure before him. The amount of power needed to stop his huge body was definitely several times more powerful than his. Furthermore, Su Zimo's defense was way too casual. He pinned the bull demon to the spot with ease. What was even more frightening was that the golden flames burning on the bull demon's body were extinguished against Su Zimo's palm. Not only that, the golden flames around Su Zimo's palm retreated continuously and were extinguished as well, as though they sensed something frightening. The bull demon was shocked. Su Zimo froze for a moment before realization dawned on him as well. The palm that he extended had the divine phoenix bone in it. No matter how strong the flames on the bull demon's body were, they could not compare to the flames of the divine phoenix. Su Zimo retracted his palm and the bull demon did not attack anymore. He lowered his head slightly and retreated in defeat. Before long, the first round was over and 50 fiend demons were eliminated. As expected, the young master of Levitating Goat Peak, the silver-robed man, the woman in makeup and the others entered the second round one after another. Solitary Cloud defeated his opponent and entered the next round successfully as well. In the second round, Su Zimo defeated his opponent without expending much effort and won yet another round. Su Zimo did not get a bye for the third round. In the fourth round, he and a fiend demon from Vermilion Cloud Valley were the only ones left on his arena. The fiend demon reverted to his true form of a toad and glared with a pair of emerald green eyes. He did not advance recklessly and instead, conjured a dermic art. A sticky green ball of water tore through the air. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze. Not only was the ball of water created with dermic powers, it was laced with poison as well. However, a poison of that level could not hurt him. Su Zimo's blood chi rumbled and he slapped casually, shattering the ball of water. Striding forward, he arrived before the toad in the blink of an eye. Buzz! All of a sudden. Suddenly, the eyes of the gigantic toad protruded and burst forth with a series of resplendent lights. It was a visual technique. The emerald-eyed toad was a pure-blooded ferocious beast and visual techniques were one of their killing moves. Unfortunately, they were facing Su Zimo. Su Zimo did not resist and merely closed his eyes. When the resplendent lights landed on his body, they could not even penetrate his physical defenses. Your eye technique is still a little lacking. Su Zimo smiled gently and waved his sleeves, sweeping up the gigantic toad and tossing it out of the arena. Su Zimo emerged victorious in the end and obtained one of the spots to cultivate in the Blood Sea. The 7 overlords were expressionless. The 7 of them had expected this to happen. Before long, the outcome of the other 9 arenas was decided as well. Apart from the young master of Levitating Goat Peak who had a belly full of badges, another territorial lord obtained a chance to cultivate. 2 fiend demons from Silvermoon Valley and Vermilion Cloud Valley obtained a chance to cultivate as well. Golden Flames Mountain, Mist, Thousand Snake Island and Ape Chatter Ridge all obtained a single person. Unfortunately, Solitary Cloud lost his final battle and did not manage to obtain a spot. Chapter 856. The 10 spots for the 1,000-year Blood Sea cultivation had been decided. The 1,000 demon meet continued but Su Zimo and the others had just experienced a huge battle. After 3 days of rest, they would officially enter the Blood Sea. At night, there were sparks of fire near the Blood Sea. Some fiend demons surrounded blazing bonfires, some had gigantic night illumination pearls circling around them, while some had balls of flames floating around them. There were many demonic arts that lit up the night. The demons drank merrily in groups of 2s and 3s or more. Dozens of them gathered together to drink and eat in a joyous manner. Apart from entertainment, the 1,000-demon meet was also a rare marketplace. At the borders of the 7 territories, there would be all sorts of stalls. Some sold treasures, elixirs, dermic weapons and secret manuals. Everything was available. Most of the things in this market were bartering. Some of the unique spirit materials and ores were only produced in a certain territory. Therefore, many fiend demons gathered around the marketplace. Monkey, Linghu, and Ching Ching dragged the unwilling little fox over to watch the fun as well. In front of Ape Chatter Ridge, the old ape stood with his hands behind his back. His eyes were half closed and his white brows fluttered on both sides of his face without any wind. Behind him stood a green-robed cultivator. It was Su Zimo. The two figures stood silently and did not fit in with the hustle and bustle of the surroundings, as though they had fused into the night. The old ape glanced sideways and suddenly asked, "You sensed it?" "Yes," Su Zimo nodded. For the past few days, he had a feeling that something big was about to happen. The heavens and the earth were filled with an indescribable murderous aura, and it caused him to feel waves of vexation. How rare, the old ape lamented. There were less than 10 fiend demons here who could sense it. To think that one of them would be a low-level fiend demon. The old ape opened his eyes and looked over. Stars dotted the skies not far away. However, the trajectories of these constellations were extremely chaotic. It was as if there was an invisible force that was manipulating the constellations in the sky. Su Zimo frowned and asked, "Is this uneasy feeling related to the stars in daytime the other day?" "Perhaps," the old ape sighed. He couldn't say for sure. Ever since the stars in daytime that day, there hadn't been such a strange phenomenon. But when night fell, if one paid attention, they would still notice that the stars in the sky were in a mess, flickering between brightness and darkness. It was extremely abnormal. Could it be related to this sea of blood? Su Zimo suddenly recalled the terrifying blood-colored human face that he had seen in a daze when he had just arrived here. Perhaps, it wasn't an illusion. "I don't know." The old ape shook his head. Su Zimo pondered for a while and asked, "What's the origin of this sea of blood? How did it form?" "I don't know." The old ape shook his head again and smiled bitterly. Su Zimo frowned. The old ape had lived for at least 5,000 years, but it knew nothing about the Blood Sea. It seemed like the Blood Sea really had some background. Su Zimo asked again, "This Blood Sea is so miraculous that it can condense the blood and souls of 10,000 demons. Has no one explored its secrets over the years?" "Yes." This time round, the old ape's tone was firm. However, he changed the topic immediately after. "However, they should have all died in it." Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. Before Su Zimo could ask, the old ape continued, "I heard that there was once a grand demon that dived into the depths of the Blood Sea and did not make it out alive." "Pust." Su Zimo opened his mouth slightly in shock. Even grand demons were dead. Grand demons were equivalent to conjoint body mighty figures of the human race. They could release heaven and earth powers with every single move and could almost be considered as top experts of Tianhuang mainland. However, such an expert had still been silently devoured by the sea of blood before his eyes. A chill ran down his spine and Su Zimo could not help but shudder. The old ape smiled gently. "However, you don't have to worry. Given your strength, there's no way you guys can sink to the bottom of the sea. As long as you cultivate normally in the Blood Sea, nothing will happen. Furthermore, for so many years, nothing has happened to those who cultivate in the Blood Sea." Su Zimo nodded. The old ape swept his gaze and frowned in the direction of the demons of Silvermoon Valley and Levitating Goat Peak not far away. Those overlords were not around and their whereabouts were unknown. Even the fiend demons under their command that were about to enter the Blood Sea to cultivate were not around. Normally speaking, killing and fighting are prohibited in the Blood Sea, the old ape said in a deep voice. However, this Blood Sea can block the detection of spirit consciousnesses. In other words, no one outside knows what happens in the Blood Sea. You've got to be careful, the old ape reminded again. Su Zimo's eyes flashed coldly as he nodded. In a forest far away, it was pitch black and sinister. A few figures appeared one after another in the forest. Listen up, this Blood Sea cultivation is your last chance if you want to avenge your humiliation. An authoritative voice sounded, this is a blood-congealing bead, a Tao Lord Dermic weapon. The 5 of you have to work together to activate it. It's a blood-congealing bead. Ha! With that treasure, wouldn't the 5 of us be able to snatch all the essence, blood and souls in the Blood Sea? A series of laughter sounded. That's enough. The authoritative voice from the beginning hollered and continued, you guys can cultivate normally after entering the Blood Sea. With the blood-congealing bead, there's a high chance that the energy in the Blood Sea will belong to the 5 of you. Although this demon is a low-level fiend demon, it's not easy to deal with. You guys have to find an opportunity and not strike recklessly. Understood. A few voices answered at the same time. Another cold voice said, if you want to strike, the 5 of you don't have to hesitate. Use your essence spirit secret skills and kill him in the Blood Sea. Understood. The 5 of them replied. The person sneered, after the Blood Sea cultivation ends and the demon dies, the 5 of you will be able to find a random excuse to cover it up. Even if the old ape is suspicious, he won't be able to say anything. Right then, a voice sounded from the side like metal clashing. How about we join in? Ha ha ha, with the help of Confusion Fog Swamp, that demon is dead for sure. At the same time, in front of Vermilion Cloud Valley's formation. The overlord of Vermilion Cloud Valley rubbed his chin and narrowed his eyes, looking at the 2 fiend demons before him who were about to enter the Blood Sea to cultivate in silence. A long time later, the overlord of Vermilion Cloud Valley heaved a sigh of relief and sent a voice transmission with his spirit consciousness, as though he had made a decision. Both of you, listen up. If anything happens or there's a fight in the Blood Sea, don't help either side. Just stay out of it and you'll be able to survive. Understood. The 2 fiend demons of Vermilion Cloud Valley bowed in response. The gaze of the overlord of Vermilion Cloud Valley flickered and he glanced in the direction of Ape Chatter Ridge in a seemingly casual manner, murmuring, could the true form of that demon truly be? Chapter 857. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Su Zimo and the other 10 fiend demons walked out one after another and stood still at the edge of the Blood Sea. Indeed, streams of extremely pure energy were emitted from the Blood Sea. It was scarlet, sticky, and gave off a strong stench of blood. Killing and fighting are forbidden in the Blood Sea, the overlord of Silvermoon Valley declared with an expressionless face. There's a limit to the amount of energy accumulated in the Blood Sea over the past 1,000 years. The 10 of you can fight for it with your own capabilities. Go on in and cultivate. The moment he said that, a fiend demon leaped into the air impatiently and leaped into the Blood Sea. The fiendish demon dived into the Blood Sea, stirred up a wave, and disappeared. The young master of Levitating Goat Peak glanced sideways at Su Zimo and smirked coldly. In a flash, he entered the Blood Sea as well. Thud. Thud. In the blink of an eye, all 10 of them entered the Blood Sea and vanished. The Blood Sea and the outside world were almost 2 different worlds. Even the spirit consciousnesses of overlords could not penetrate the barrier of the Blood Sea. Therefore, no one outside knew what would happen within the Blood Sea and could only guess. The overlords of Levitating Goat Peak and Silvermoon Valley exchanged glances and nodded. They were prepared this time round and there would definitely not be any accidents. The moment he entered the Blood Sea, Su Zimo sensed an extremely pure energy surrounding him and was extremely rich. Su Zimo was secretly delighted. After a few exchanges during this trip, he had already sensed an opportunity for a breakthrough. Now that he was replenished with sufficient energy, he was going to obtain unimaginable benefits from the Blood Sea. While he was outside, his spiritual consciousness could not penetrate the Blood Sea. However, after entering the Blood Sea, his spiritual consciousness would not be affected. Su Zimo's spirit consciousness shifted and he caught sight of the other 9 fiend demons before long. Among them, 2 fiend demons of Vermilion Cloud Valley stood together. The fiend demon of Golden Flames Mountain and him each occupied a region. However, there were a total of 6 fiend demons from Silvermoon Valley, Levitating Goat Peak, Thousand Snake Island and Confusion Mist Swamp. They were united and occupied the center of the Blood Sea. When he noticed that the 6 of them were united, Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and his gaze flickered. The purpose of his trip was to break through to the next realm. If these 6 people did not find trouble with him, he would not take the initiative to provoke them. But if these 6 people didn't open their eyes, killing intent flashed in Su Zimo's eyes. Whoosh! Su Zimo circulated his chi and blood, constantly absorbing the energy in the Blood Sea. Streams of energy surged into his body, flowing through his limbs and bones, fusing into every inch of his flesh and blood. Streams of energy surged into his sea of consciousness and fused with the red-haired Een spirit and the black-haired primordial spirit. Scales appeared on the scarlet-haired Een spirit's body one after another as it reared its head and roared into the skies, releasing a powerful suction force. Purple lightning flashed in the black-haired essence soul's eyes. There seemed to be Sanskrit chanting around it as it constantly absorbed the surrounding energy. The Qinglian of creation spun slowly. 4 layers of lotus petals, a total of 36 petals bloomed, emitting streams of misty chaos chi. Endless energy surged into his sea of consciousness and was absorbed by the 2 essence spirits and the Qinglian of creation. With the Qinglian of creation and the 2 essence spirits, a vortex was formed above Su Zimo's head that spun continuously. If one focused their attention, they would realize that there was a power that could not be ignored emanating from Su Zimo's wrist as well, absorbing the energy in the Blood Sea. The fiend demons of Golden Flames Mountain and Vermilion Cloud Valley revealed envious expressions. There was a limit to the energy in the Blood Sea. Whoever plundered the most would gain the most benefits. The young master of Levitating Goat Peak, the silver-robed man and the other 5 were in the middle of the Blood Sea. When they saw that, their expressions were cold and murderous. The 6 of them exchanged glances and nodded. The silver-robed man withdrew a blood-red bead from his storage bag that was the size of a human face carefully. It was a Tao Lord Dermic weapon, blood-congealing bead. The moment the blood-congealing bead was taken out, the energy in the Blood Sea surged towards the blood-congealing bead, as though it was attracted by a powerful force. The 6 fiend demons were delighted. The blood-congealing bead was already causing such a commotion even before they refined it. If the 6 of them were to refine it together, wouldn't all the energy in the Blood Sea belong to them? Without hesitation, the glabellas of the 6 fiend demons shone and released streams of spirit consciousness into the blood-congealing bead. Buzz! 4 blood-colored dermic patterns shone on the blood-congealing bead. This was a supreme-grade Tao Lord Dermic weapon. Whoosh! One after another, streams of energy that were visible to the naked eye surged towards the blood-congealing bead before surging into the bodies of the 6 fiend demons. Look, what a strong power of plunder! It's formed a vortex. On the plains, a fiend demon pointed to a vortex that was floating on the surface of the Blood Sea and exclaimed. Look over there. The demons shifted their gazes and saw an even larger vortex appear in the middle of the Blood Sea. The overlords of Silvermoon Valley and Levitating Goat Peak smiled gently and could not conceal the glee in their eyes. What methods did you guys use? The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain could not hold it in any longer and stood up, questioning loudly, how can the few of them cause such a huge commotion? I don't know about that. It's only normal for juniors to have some trump cards up their sleeves, the overlord of Silvermoon Valley replied indifferently. The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain glared angrily. What are the other fiend demons in the Blood Sea cultivating for if they plunder so brazenly? They can't be blamed for that. It's all based on their own capabilities, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak sneered, the energy of the Blood Sea is limited. If that calf from Golden Flames Mountain has the capabilities, he can cause a huge commotion as well. The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain grit his teeth in hatred, but he could not say anything. Within the Blood Sea, Su Zimo frowned when he sensed the commotion on the other side. Naturally, he could tell that the dermic weapon released by the 6 fiend demons was a Tao Lord dermic weapon. The Tao Lord dermic weapon that the 6 fiend demons released together formed a powerful vortex that sucked away even the energy around him forcefully. They sure are generous to borrow a Tao Lord dermic weapon, Su Zimo cursed internally. The young master of Levitating Goat Peak and the other 5 fiend demons looked at Su Zimo smugly with mockery in their eyes. The young master of Levitating Goat Peak sent a voice transmission, "Mo, if you want to cultivate, you can come and beg us. If you're sincere, we might even consider it and agree to it." Ha 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 ha. The other 5 burst into laughter. Su Zimo's gaze was cold. Right now, he was at the peak of mid-stage nascent soul realm and was close to breaking through. If he allowed the young master of Levitating Goat Peak and the other 5 to plunder as they pleased, he wouldn't be able to break through at all. Furthermore, there was no way he could raise Creation Qinglian to grade 5. Since you guys are unscrupulous, don't blame me for what happens next. Su Zimo's eyes lit up and were bloodshot in a sinister manner. Absorb. Su Zimo channeled the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and reared his head into the skies. His entire body seemed to have transformed into a gigantic black hole that absorbed the energy of the Blood Sea endlessly. The Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra was a terrifying fiend technique that targeted bloodlines. Although the Spirit Condensation Pearl was a Tao Lord dermic weapon, it was not as domineering as the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra. Instantly, an even stronger and more terrifying vortex formed around Su Zimo, engulfing the entire Blood Sea. Chapter 858. The entire Blood Sea was spinning majestically with a deep depression right in the middle. It rumbled with a terrifying might. The demons were moved. Wasn't this commotion way too huge? The fiend demons below must have used some sort of Tao Lord dermic weapon, right? The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain glared at the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak and the others with a grim expression and said hatefully, otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to create such a commotion given their strength. The overlord of Silvermoon Valley and the others exchanged glances without saying anything. To be fair, they were surprised as well. The overlord of Silvermoon Valley lamented internally, to think that the blood congealing bead would be able to produce such a great effect in the Blood Sea. Old ape, think of something, the overlord of Golden Flames Mountain sent a voice transmission in frustration. The old ape sighed internally. There's no solution to this. Even if we know that they're up to something, we can't interfere. In reality, the situation in the Blood Sea was extremely different from what they had predicted. The ones who were truly flustered were not Su Zimo or the fiend demons of Golden Flames Mountain. It was the young master of Levitating Goat Peak, the silver-robed man and the other 5. The 6 of them worked together to summon the blood congealing bead. Initially, they wanted to make use of the blood congealing bead to plunder all the energy in the Blood Sea clean before attacking Su Zimo. But now, even the Tao Lord dermic weapon, the blood congealing bead, could not match the aura released from Su Zimo's body. How was that possible? Even if the 6 of them were not high-level fiend demons and could not unleash the true might of the blood congealing bead, how could this low-level fiend demon's plundering of the Blood Sea be even more domineering than the blood congealing bead? Not to mention the energy in the Blood Sea, even the blood in their bodies became restless for some reason and could not be calmed down. What sort of demonic art is this? The eyes of the young master of Levitating Goat Peak and the other 5 were filled with shock. The fiend demons of Golden Flames Mountain and Vermilion Cloud Valley were already hiding in a corner, trying their best to absorb the remnant energy in the area. There was not much energy left. Or rather, the amount of energy they could absorb was almost negligible against such a terrifying and domineering plundering. The energy in the Blood Sea was initially meant for the cultivation of the 10 mid-level fiend demons. And now, all of it had entered Su Zimo's body. It was not hard to imagine how much energy this was. The auras of the two primordial spirits continued to rise. At the same time, Qinglian of Good Fortune was also nourished. Her aura became more and more terrifying as she spun continuously. If one were to look carefully, they would discover that on the outermost periphery of the green lotus platform, fresh green petals were growing once again. Under the constant nourishment of the black-haired essence spirit, the tender green petals grew rapidly at an extremely fast speed. 9 more holes were added to the lotus throne. Now, there were 45 of them. The 45 lotus holes spewed out streams of green light that fused into the black-haired essence spirit continuously, causing its aura to surge. 5th grade green lotus of creation. Creation Qinglian was nourished by the black-haired essence soul. On the other hand, Qinglian could also make the black-haired essence spirit even more condensed and powerful. The red-haired Yin spirit was the easiest to absorb the energy from the Blood Sea. This was because the scarlet-haired Yin spirit was a primordial spirit of a demon. All of a sudden, the scarlet-haired Yin spirit shuddered and opened his eyes, roaring into the skies. Boom! A series of raging waves surged within his consciousness. He had broken through. The scarlet-haired Yin spirit was already at late-stage Yin spirit realm, or late-stage nascent soul realm. In less than 15 minutes after entering the Blood Sea, not only did creation Qinglian advance, the scarlet-haired Yin spirit also broke through. Right then, Su Zimo felt a sense of danger. There was nothing unusual about the Blood Sea beside him. However, there was a suffocating murderous aura surging towards him, arriving in an instant. A spirit consciousness attack. An essence spirit secret skill. Although Su Zimo's eyes were closed, a scene was reflected in his mind. There were already 6 figures surrounding him. They were the 6 young masters of Levitating Goat Peak. The 6 fiend demons glared at Su Zimo with menacing expressions that were filled with coldness and ferocity, as though they were looking at a dead man. They had been waiting for this moment for way too long. The timing of their attacks was almost perfect. Su Zimo had just broken through and his cultivation realm was still unstable. At that moment, their attacks could be said to be fatal. Disregarding whether Su Zimo would be able to react in time. Even if he did, his essence spirit with an unstable cultivation realm could not even condense his spirit consciousness, let alone defend against their essence spirit secret skills. That single attack was enough to kill Su Zimo. Under normal circumstances, Su Zimo was indeed dead for sure. However, they were wrong about something. There were not 1 essence spirit in Su Zimo's consciousness, there were 2. The scarlet-haired Yin spirit had broken through while the black-haired essence spirit had yet to break through despite the fact that it was nourishing creation Qinglian continuously. Therefore, the black-haired essence spirit had already sensed it the moment the 6 of them moved. In a flash, Su Zimo made a prompt decision and fused the 2 essence spirits together. In the blink of an eye, a brand new essence spirit appeared. Its long hair fluttered and it was red and black. One of its eyes was red and the other black. It was extremely sinister. The scarlet-haired Yin spirit had just broken through and his aura was unstable along with his cultivation realm. However, his aura stabilized after the fusion of the 2 essence spirits. Buzz! A shimmering golden barrier formed around Su Zimo's body. It looked indestructible and ancient Sanskrit shone faintly on it. After the fusion of the essence spirits, he chose to activate the Mingwang prayer beads right away. Even though he had broken through to late-stage nascent soul, he was still a low-level fiend demon. There was almost no chance of him winning in a head-on clash of essence spirits against 6 top-tier mid-level fiend demons that cultivated essence spirit secret skills. He could only retaliate if he defended against the 6 essence spirit secret skills with all his might. Dong! 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 The 6 spirit consciousnesses collided against the golden barrier and let out dull thuds. Immediately after, the golden barrier formed by the Mingwang prayer beads shattered abruptly. Although the 6 spirit consciousnesses were weakened significantly, they were still terrifying and could destroy the essence spirit of any mid-level fiend demon with ease. Swoosh! The 6 spirit consciousnesses barged into Su Zimo's consciousness. However, Su Zimo's essence spirit had already leaped onto the creation lotus platform. One after another, scarlet spirit consciousness dragon scales grew on the surface of Su Zimo's essence spirit. 45 lotus seeds spewed out from the creation Qinglian and shone with a green glow. Mist rose and formed 45 rays of light that circled around him continuously. Cling! Clang! The moment the 6 spirit consciousnesses descended, they were struck and sliced by the 45 lotus seeds repeatedly. To Su Zimo's surprise, the lotus seeds exuded an extremely frightening sharpness that could even slice and tear apart spirit consciousnesses. There were extremely few things that could defend against the power of spirit consciousnesses. The creation Qinglian could not do it as well. However, to think that the lotus seeds nurtured within would possess such a powerful effect. It was indeed true that the lotus could steal the creations of heaven and earth. The 6 spirit consciousnesses were sliced into pieces by the 45 lotus seeds. Although they still had strength left, they struck Su Zimo's essence spirit. However, they were blocked by the spirit consciousness dragon scales on his body and dissipated silently. Su Zimo heaved a sigh of relief and his lips curled slightly as killing intent flashed through his eyes. After blocking the 6 essence spirit secret skills, others would be the ones to suffer next. Chapter 859. On the Plains. The demons were staring fixedly at the frightening vortex in the middle of the Blood Sea. However, before long, the vortex dissipated gradually and the surface of the sea regained its calmness. What's wrong? What's happening below? All the fiend demons knew that although the Blood Sea looked calm on the surface, there were definitely turbulent undercurrents beneath. The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain was a little uneasy. From time to time, he would glance at the overlord of Silvermoon Valley. The old ape was still the same, leaning back on his chair like an old monk in meditation, as though he was asleep. Brother, why aren't you worried at all? The potential of that lad from Ape Chatter Ridge is unimaginable. Aren't you afraid that they'll backstab him? The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain could not help but comment, let me tell you, those people from Levitating Goat Peak are a little deranged. They're capable of anything. The old ape's eyes widened slightly as he replied indifferently, there's no point in being anxious. As for that lad from Ape Chatter Ridge, I'm not worried. That confident? The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain raised his brow. Don't forget, his cultivation realm is there for all to see. Can he win against the other party if they use essence spirit secret skills? The old ape shook his head. I'm not sure if he can win against others. However, I reckon that he'll be able to escape at the very least if someone tries to harm him. On the other side. The overlords of Levitating Goat Peak, Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island and Confusion Mist Swamp exchanged glances and nodded secretly. Although they could not see the situation in the Blood Sea, it was easy to guess. If nothing went wrong, the young master of Levitating Goat Peak and the others had already attacked. That was because if they attacked, they would not be able to use the blood congealing bead to absorb energy and the vortex would dissipate naturally. In reality, their guesses were more or less the same. Both parties had indeed exchanged blows in the Blood Sea. However, the actual situation was slightly different from the guesses of the 4 overlords. It was those slight differences that caused the entire outcome to be vastly different from what the 4 overlords had imagined. In the Blood Sea. From the release of the 6 essence spirit secret skills to Su Zimo releasing his trump cards consecutively to defend, the entire process seemed long upon narration but in reality, it happened in the blink of an eye. The moment Su Zimo opened his eyes, the young master of Levitating Goat Peak and the others had an ominous feeling. You provoked me before, so I spared your life. Su Zimo's voice echoed in the ears of the young master of levitating Goat Peak. "If you dare to touch me today, I'll send you on your way first." Voila! A black shadow pounced on him, accompanied by a suffocating stream of water, surging towards him. It was too fast. Although the young master of levitating Goat Peak was a mid-level fiend demon and could move freely underwater, he lived on land most of the time. After entering the water, there was still a lot of discomfort. Furthermore, the resistance of the water flow to the body was extremely great. It was completely different from the air on land. However, the young master of levitating Goat Peak had not expected Su Zimo's speed in the Blood Sea to be even faster than on land. He arrived instantly. Subconsciously, he wanted to dodge backward. If they were on land, he would definitely be able to dodge this attack. But this was in the Blood Sea. In the end, he was still a little slower. That opening might not mean much in the eyes of others. However, in front of Su Zimo, it was equivalent to him walking into the gates of hell. Su Zimo's extended palm had already enveloped the entire world. Bang! The young master of levitating Goat Peak could not retreat in time, and it was already too late for him to defend. This palm landed solidly on the top of his head. A series of cracks appeared on the young master of levitating Goat Peak's head as blood and brain matter flowed out. His essence spirit was already shattered. The young master of levitating Goat Peak's eyes were widened in disbelief. He had not expected that even 6 essence spirit secret skills would not be able to kill Su Zimo. More than that, he had not expected Su Zimo's counterattack to be so decisive that he had no chance at all. "He's the descendant of an overlord, how dare you?" The fiend demon of Confusion Mist Swamp was alarmed and was about to berate when before he could finish, Su Zimo had already turned around and charged towards him. "I don't care whose descendant you are. If you dare to kill me, you'll have to be prepared to be killed." In a flash, Su Zimo shuttled through the Blood Sea like a fish in water and arrived before the fiend demon of Confusion Mist Swamp in the blink of an eye. He possessed the bloodline of dragons and possessed the spirit refinement technique of dragons. His body was equivalent to half a dragon. Dragons were born with the ability to summon rain and could even overturn rivers and seas. Su Zimo was completely unaffected underwater. The true form of the fiend demon of Confusion Mist Swamp was an ancient gigantic crocodile and was not affected underwater. When he saw Su Zimo close in, he transformed into his true form with a shake of his body. A gigantic crocodile appeared in the Blood Sea. Its body was covered in a thick and tough layer of skin that was comparable to defensive dermic weapons. Kill! The ancient gigantic crocodile opened its mouth and spat out an ancient saber. The back of the saber was extremely thick and it looked powerful with 5 dermic patterns etched on it. It was a perfect Dao being dermic weapon. A single look was all it took to tell that the saber was created by a weapon refinement grandmaster of the human race. The dermic patterns on it, including the hammering of the blade and the lines of the saber, were all extremely particular. The saber slashed down towards Su Zimo's face. The sharpness of the saber sliced the Blood Sea into 2. At the same time, a series of strange ripples came from the water behind Su Zimo. The dermic weapons of a fiend demon of levitating Goat Peak, a woman in makeup from Thousand Snake Island and 2 fiend demons from Silvermoon Valley had arrived as well. Su Zimo's expression was unchanged as he slapped his storage bag and tossed out a grayish-black mountain peak to defend his back. It was the ancient unique treasure, Mystic Magnet Mountain. On the other side, his glabella shone and a green lotus platform flew out, colliding with the incoming saber. Qinglian creation. This was the first time Su Zimo had used the Qinglian creation against an enemy ever since he obtained it. The Qinglian creation spun slowly and was as clear as jade. It shone with a green glow and was filled with streams of chaos chi as it collided against the saber in a seemingly weak manner. Clang! There was a crisp sound. Immediately after, the entire Blood Sea seemed to have fallen into silence. Su Zimo's pupils constricted slightly. The ancient gigantic crocodile's expression froze and its eyes were filled with endless shock. The saber in the Blood Sea was a perfect grade Dao being dermic weapon. After colliding with the seemingly fragile green lotus, dense cracks appeared on the saber's body. Swoosh! The saber exploded into a pile of shards that scattered into the Blood Sea and sank to the bottom of the sea. A perfect grade Dao being dermic weapon with 5 dermic patterns was shattered just like that. The 2 fiend demons of Golden Flames Mountain and Vermilion Cloud Valley who were watching the battle from the edge of the Blood Sea were shocked and choked on a few mouthfuls of seawater in a moment of carelessness. The ancient gigantic crocodile glared at the Qinglian that was floating in the Blood Sea and was so scared that he could not speak. Even Khanate dermic weapons could not shatter perfect grade dermic weapons. That green lotus platform had actually shattered his destiny dermic weapon. What was that green lotus platform? Right then, his essence spirit felt a sharp pain. His essence spirit received quite a shock from the shattering of his destiny dermic weapon as well, as though it was torn apart by someone. The next moment, a green light flashed before his eyes. The green lotus platform descended and smashed onto his head. Chapter 860. Even a perfect grade Dao being dermic weapon was shattered by the creation Qinglian. How tough could the head of the fiend demon of confusion mist swamp be? Piak! The head of the fiend demon of confusion mist swamp exploded instantly and a blood mist gushed out, fusing with the surrounding blood sea. Even though the creation Qinglian was in the blood mist, it was still as green as jade and was not stained with blood at all. It shone with a crystalline luster and was shrouded by chaos chi. The essence spirit was destroyed and the fiend demon of confusion mist swamp was dead. The headless corpse sank slowly into the depths of the blood sea and vanished. To be fair, even Su Zimo had not expected the creation Qinglian to possess such frightening killing power. It had been 100 years since he obtained this lotus platform in the ancient battlefield. For the past 100 years, Su Zimo had been nourishing it with his essence spirit and made use of the blood sea before him to nurture it to grade 5. For a destiny dermic weapon, this was a rather long period of time. Furthermore, this was Su Zimo. If it was anyone else without 2 essence spirits and 3 heaven-defying spirit refinement techniques, it would be a fool's dream to nurture a grade 5 creation Qinglian within 100 years. Thankfully, his weight and effort did not disappoint him. The creation Qinglian was much stronger and more frightening than he had imagined. It was true that it could steal the creations of heaven and earth. Su Zimo had a feeling that this was not the end of the mysteries of the creation Qinglian. As his cultivation realm increased, the creation green lotus would release an even more dazzling brilliance. In the blink of an eye, 2 of the 6 mid-level fiend demons that surrounded Su Zimo were dead. The battle was not over yet. Cling! Clang! At the same time, sounds of collisions could be heard from the mystic magnet mountain. 2 of the 4 dermic weapons that attacked from behind were sucked in by the mystic magnet mountain. Although the other 2 were not sucked in by the mystic magnet mountain, they were repelled by it as well. The woman in makeup was shocked and exclaimed, "What is that?" The silver-robed man had a grim expression as he replied slowly, "It seems to be an ancient unique treasure, the mystic magnet mountain. As for the lotus throne, I don't know. Everyone, be careful. Keep your distance. Don't let him get close to you." The remaining fiend demon of levitating goat peak hollered and retreated. Silver Moon Slash. The glabellas of the silver-robed man and the other fiend demon from Silvermoon Valley shone as they channeled their spirit consciousnesses and gathered dermic powers, releasing a powerful demonic art of the Silvermoon wolf race. Whoosh! 2 dazzling silver lights cut through the sea of blood and arrived in front of Su Zimo in an instant. The temperature in the blood sea plummeted. Wherever the 2 streaks of silver light passed, the sea of blood even showed signs of freezing. On the other side, the woman in makeup flicked her wrist gently and 2 sharp dermic weapons approached silently, emitting a fatal killing intent. This was a Dharma artifact refined from the poisonous fangs of the snake race. Even the mystic magnet mountain could not absorb it. The fiend demon of levitating goat Peak opened its mouth and spat out a flying sword made of an unknown material towards Suzumo's back. At the same time, he channeled his spirit consciousness and released a demonic art. Suddenly, bone spikes made of dermic powers appeared in the blood sea one after another. There were at least dozens of them and they surged over, wanting to turn Suzumo into a sieve. Suzumo executed killing moves consecutively and killed 2 fiend demons. However, the remaining 4 were not to be underestimated as well. The combat strength of the 4 of them could be considered as top-tier experts among mid-level fiend demons. Even Solitary Cloud was not a match for them. When the 4 mid-level fiend demons attacked at the same time, the power of a major cultivation realm above them surged over and posed an immense threat to Suzumo. Roar! Suzumo's blood chi rumbled as he reared his head and howled. The terrifying roar had already squeezed away the sea of blood around him, forming a vacuum. Immediately after, gigantic ancient demon kings appeared one after another around him with menacing fangs and claws. Their gazes were frightening and lifelike. Bloodline phenomenon. Bloodline phenomenons were the only things that could defend against the attacks of 4 top-tier mid-level fiend demons. 7 demon kings of the great wilderness had appeared. The 8th demon king should be a dragon king. However, Suzumo had only cultivated the Yin spirit section and had not touched upon the Yang spirit section yet. Yet, the 8th demon king was merely a phantom. However, just the phantom of the 7 demon kings was enough to shock the fiend demons in the blood sea. Bloodline phenomenons were something that could only be obtained when one's bloodline was extremely powerful. It was a level higher than tsunami blood. Bang! 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 The collision of demonic arts was massive. In the blink of an eye, the 7 demon kings dissipated and the demonic arts of the 4 fiend demons were dispelled by the 7 demon kings without any effect. At the same time, Suzumo willed and the creation Qinglian drifted towards the 2 venomous fangs behind him. Piak! Piak! There were 2 crisp sounds. The 2 venomous fangs were shattered by the creation Qinglian. That was the destiny dermic weapon of the woman in makeup. Her expression changed and she opened her mouth gently, spitting out a mouthful of blood. She glared at Suzumo with shock in the depths of her eyes. The phantom of the 8th demon king gave her a sense of trepidation. It was a fear that originated from the depths of her soul, her bloodline and her bones. It was an absolute suppression of her bloodline. The creation Qinglian charged towards her in a seemingly unhurried manner. However, it arrived in the blink of an eye. The woman in makeup shuddered and snapped out of her stupor. Hurriedly, she waved her hands and set up dermic power barriers in front of the creation Qinglian. At the same time, the woman in makeup had thoughts of retreating. She wanted to make use of the dermic power barriers to escape from the blood sea and distance herself from Suzumo while the creation Qinglian was obstructed. However, she soon realized that she was wrong. The dermic power barriers she set up were like paper in front of the creation green lotus. They had no effect at all. The creation Qinglian drifted and penetrated them with ease, chasing after her like a shadow. Immense fear rose in the heart of the woman in makeup. Suddenly, she realized that all her methods were useless against the green lotus platform. She could not even block it for a moment. A look of determination flashed through the eyes of the woman in makeup. Abandon her body. Abandoning his physical body and leaving the blood sea with his essence spirit was better than having his essence spirit destroyed and dying here. Swash! A thumb-sized snake burrowed out of the top of the woman in makeup's head and sped towards the surface of the sea with a flash of light. The moment her essence spirit left her body, the creation Qinglian smashed her head into smithereens. That was the difference between life and death. The woman in makeup lowered her head and felt a sense of trepidation. If she was slower by half a breath, her essence spirit would have been destroyed by now. Just as she was secretly rejoicing, a mysterious change happened to the green lotus platform beneath. Whoosh! 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 Suddenly, 45 lotus seeds spewed out from the lotus hole on the green lotus platform. They turned into rays of light that intertwined with one another and sped over with an extremely sharp aura. They were way too fast. Although her essence spirit was a step ahead, the 45 lotus seeds caught up before long and pierced her essence spirit. Poof! 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 In front of these 45 lotus seeds, her primordial spirit could not resist at all. Ah! The essence spirit of the woman in makeup let out a final shriek and its light dimmed rapidly. It was destroyed on the spot. Chapter 861. By the time Qingnian killed the woman in makeup, Su Zimo had already vanished from the spot. Splash! The sound of water splashing could be heard. A fiend demon from Silvermoon Valley swept his gaze and his eyelids twitched. He was almost scared out of his wits. A pair of frightening eyes that emitted endless killing intent was right before him. Instinctively, he wanted to turn and flee. However, the scene of the young master of Levitating Goat Peak dying flashed through his mind before long. His true form was a Silvermoon wolf and his speed in the Blood Sea would be greatly affected as well. There was no way he could escape from Su Zimo's pursuit. If he fled now, he would definitely have no chance of survival and would only follow in the footsteps of the young master of Levitating Goat Peak. I'm going all out. The fiend demon from Silvermoon Valley roared and lunged towards Su Zimo with menacing claws. At the same time, he opened his bloodied mouth and bit towards Su Zimo's neck. He knew that given his strength, it would be difficult for him to defeat Su Zimo in melee combat. His only hope was for the silver-robed man and the fiend demon from Levitating Goat Peak to attack at the same time to restrain Su Zimo. However, it was a pity that his hopes were dashed. In the blink of an eye, 3 of the 6 fiend demons were dead. If it was anyone else, they would be intimidated by such a powerful and fierce method. Although the silver-robed man and the fiend demon from Levitating Goat Peak were a major cultivation realm higher than Su Zimo, their eyes flashed with hesitation at that moment. Should they advance or retreat? That single moment of hesitation was enough to announce the death of the fiend demon from Silvermoon Valley. You must have a death wish. Su Zimo did not dodge or avoid. He strode forward and extended his hand with lightning speed, clamping down on the upper and lower jaws of the Silvermoon wolf before him. How strong was Su Zimo's physique? The Silvermoon wolf could not close its jaws at all. Its claws scratched Su Zimo's chest and tore through his green robes. However, the sound of metal clashing could be heard and sparks flew everywhere. The Silvermoon wolf's eyes widened in disbelief as it looked at Su Zimo's chest. There, pieces of crimson scales could be faintly seen. Su Zimo harumphed coldly and channeled his blood chi. The veins on his arms bulged and his flesh expanded as he exerted strength. Whoosh! The Silvermoon wolf in front of him was torn in half by Su Zimo. Within the blood mist, an essence spirit fled frantically. Before he could escape far, he was caught up by Su Zimo and shattered with a single palm strike. His essence spirit was destroyed and he was buried in a sea of blood. Run! The remaining fiend demon of Levitating Goat Peak and the silver-robed man no longer hesitated. With pale faces, they turned and fled in 2 different directions. As long as he could escape and tell them about what had happened in the Blood Sea, Emoyao would definitely die. No one would be able to save him. It's too late to escape now. Su Zimo's bone-chilling voice rang out behind them. The fiend demon of Levitating Goat Peak was swimming with all his might. Without any warning, he felt a strong sense of danger, as though there was a thorn in his back. Instinctively, he turned around. Su Zimo did not chase after him. Instead, he followed behind the silver-robed man and closed in on him like a maggot. How could this be? The fiend demon of Levitating Goat Peak was confused. Since Su Zimo did not chase after him, where did this sense of danger come from? Could it be a hallucination? In his moment of hesitation, Su Zimo, who was chasing after the silver-robed man, suddenly turned around and looked over. The next moment, the eyes of the fiend demon of levitating goat peak were filled with an extremely bedazzling brilliance. Su Zimo's eyes seemed to have lit up with a blazing sun. It illuminated the depths of the blood sea for a brief moment. A blinding beam of light tore through the layers of the blood sea and arrived instantly, striking the head of the fiend demon of levitating goat peak with an incomparably terrifying aura. That's a visual technique. The thought flashed through the mind of the fiend demon of levitating goat peak, and he only had time to tilt his head slightly. This beam of light had already smashed half of his head into pieces. His essence spirit was not spared from the gaze of the illumination eye as well. Instantly, it was reduced to ashes. Far away, the three fiend demons of Golden Flames Mountain and Vermilion Cloud Valley who were watching the battle from a corner initially felt chills running down their spines and shuddered. 5 mid-level fiend demons were buried in this bottomless blood sea within a dozen breaths' time. On the plains, the demons discussed fervently, but all of them were paying close attention to the blood sea. Ever since the shockingly massive vortex dissipated just now, the blood sea had not calmed down at all. No one knew what was happening below, but waves surged on the surface of the sea, crashing against the shore from time to time. The 7 overlords stood in midair and looked down at the blood sea from above, as though they wanted to see through the situation below. Even the old ape had a grim expression. After a dozen breaths' time, the waves on the surface of the sea calmed down. Before long, the blood sea regained its calmness. However, for some unknown reason, the atmosphere of the world seemed to have turned even more oppressive despite the calmness. The calmness was more like the calm before a storm. All of a sudden, a wolf's head appeared on the surface of the blood sea. It was the silver-robed man, the #1 territorial lord of Silvermoon Valley. The demons had sharp gazes and recognized the identity of the wolf's head instantly. The face of the wolf's head was filled with helplessness, panic, fear and shock. Save! The moment the silver-robed man revealed his head, he shouted a single word. Immediately after, in front of countless gazes, the silver-robed man's body plummeted, as though he was grabbed by some force and dragged back into the blood sea. The overlord of Silvermoon Valley narrowed his gaze nervously and gripped his fists so tightly that even his arms were trembling. The demons were in an uproar. The blood sea could isolate spirit consciousness and all sounds. At this moment, the demons were finally certain that something major had happened beneath the blood sea. What was it that caused the silver-robed man to be so fearful? Just as that thought flashed through the minds of the demons, the surface of the sea split open once more and an essence spirit escaped. It was the essence spirit of the silver-robed man. The overlord of Silvermoon Valley was delighted and heaved a sigh of relief. As long as the essence spirit escaped, he could at least preserve his life. However, before he could calm down completely, his heart skipped a beat once more. The moment the silver-robed man's essence spirit escaped from the surface of the seawater surged and formed a gigantic blood-colored hand that scooped upwards. Poof! The gigantic blood-colored hand gripped the silver-robed man's essence spirit and crushed it. Swoosh! The gigantic blood-colored hand dissipated into a pool of blood and returned to the blood sea. The demons were dumbfounded. None of them expected that the silver-robed man who was about to escape with his life would not be able to escape in the end and die in front of everyone. The overlord of Silvermoon Valley's expression froze on his face. Even the 7 overlords could not react in time, let alone him. Everything happened way too quickly. Who would have thought that the silver-robed man would be devoured by the blood sea even though he had escaped? Instantly, countless questions appeared in the hearts of the demons. Who was the one who dragged the silver-robed man down? What was that gigantic blood-colored hand? Apart from him, what was the situation of the other 9 fiend demons in the blood sea right now? Chapter 862. The vicinity of the blood sea fell into a deathly silence. Even the 7 overlords had grim expressions as they stood in midair and looked down at the blood sea from above, not daring to act recklessly. At that moment, they could not help but recall the legends of the thousand-year blood sea. Right then, the entire surface of the sea suddenly caved in and spun slowly. Before long, a gigantic vortex was formed. The vortex that had just vanished reappeared once more. The silver-robed man was already dead and the fates of the others were unknown. Who was the one who created this gigantic vortex? The blood sea surged with raging waves in a frightening manner, as though an ancient fiend god was awakening in the depths of the blood sea. Little Fox murmured with a worried expression, "Will young master be fine?" "Don't worry," Ling Hu replied, "First is extremely tenacious. Those fiend demons won't be able to threaten him." Monkey said deeply, "I reckon that he was the one who created this gigantic vortex." Right then, 3 figures flew out of the blood sea. The demons were invigorated and turned to look. "It's the fiend demons of Golden Flames Mountain. Those 2 are the fiend demons of Vermilion Cloud Valley," the demons exclaimed. Worried that the previous situation would repeat itself, the overlords of Golden Flames Mountain and Vermilion Cloud Valley reacted extremely quickly and dragged the 3 figures back decisively. However, just now, the gigantic blood-colored hand had yet to appear. What's going on? What happened below? Before the overlord of Golden Flames Mountain could ask, the overlords of Silvermoon Valley, Levitating Goat Peak and the others had already surrounded them with sharp gazes and stern expressions. "Dead. They're all dead." A fiend demon of Vermilion Cloud Valley seemed to be extremely shocked. Although he had already left the blood sea, his eyes were still filled with endless fear. "Dead?" The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak shouted, "Who's dead? Tell me clearly." The fiend demon of Vermilion Cloud Valley shuddered from the roar and could not speak for a moment. The fiend demon of Vermilion Cloud Valley at the side calmed down and gulped. Not long after cultivating in the blood sea, the young master of Levitating Goat Peak, the #1 territorial lord of Silvermoon Valley and the other 6 fiend demons struck out at Mo for the sake of plundering resources. However, the fiend demon paused for a moment and took a deep breath. However, all 6 of them were killed by Mo and are dead. Ah! Hearing this, the demons cried out in surprise. The group of demons was shocked. 6 mid-level fiendish demons had attacked him together, but they ended up with their bodies and souls destroyed. That was truly tragic. In that case, the enormous vortex before them was probably created by Mo as well. The overlord of Shixia Valley let out a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he had instructed the 2 fiendish demons under his command to stay out of the blood sea if they saw any fighting in it. How is this possible? The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak grit his teeth and snarled word by word with a grim expression, "What sort of cultivation and combat strength do the 6 of them have? How can that little beast defend against their essence spirit secret skills?" The 3 fiend demons that escaped from the blood sea remained silent. In reality, it was true that the 6 essence spirit secret skills did not manage to injure Su Zimo. The old ape was relieved. The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain relaxed as well and chuckled. So, some people went for wool and came home shorn. Serves them right. The gazes of the overlords of Levitating Goat Peak, Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island and Confusion Mist Swamp were cold and grim. The losses this time round were way too great. The few fiend demons that entered the blood sea had immense potential and even had a chance of breaking through to become high-level fiend demons within the next 1,000 years. But now, all 6 of them were buried in the blood sea. He has to pay with his life. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's voice was cold and filled with killing intent. That's right. The overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp's voice was firm. That demon is vicious and has no respect for us at all. Nobody can protect him today. Foo-foo. Suddenly, the old ape chuckled and remarked indifferently, "The entire process is clear. Those juniors of yours were the ones who attacked first but were killed because they were not up to par. How is that vicious? Killing is forbidden in the blood sea. Yet, those juniors dared to attack. Did they have any respect for the rules of Thousand Demon Valley? Who gave them the guts to do so? The old ape's tone turned sharper. His two long white brows fluttered. Although he was old, he exuded a domineering aura that could not be ignored. There's a reason why they attacked, the overlord of Silvermoon Valley said in a deep voice. I don't know what sort of cultivation technique that demon released or what sort of treasure he used to cause such a huge commotion and steal the energy of the blood seas so brazenly. How are the other fiend demons going to cultivate? Since that demon wanted to reap all the benefits for himself, he should be killed by all the other demons. Ha 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 ha. When he heard that, the overlord of Golden Flames Mountain could not help but burst into laughter. You guys were clearly the ones who caused the 6 juniors to join forces to steal the energy of the Blood Sea first. Yet, you guys have the cheek to accuse us now. No matter what, that demon has to die today. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's eyes flashed and he made up his mind. Oh. The old ape's aura rose continuously as he said slowly, anyone who dares to touch him will be my enemy. Don't blame me for going on a killing spree today without mercy. Old monkey, you won't be able to protect him. The overlord of Silvermoon Valley shook his head slowly. They had at least 4 overlords on their side. So what if I'm included? The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain stood out. The overlord of Thousand Snake Island smiled gently without a care. There's only 2 even if you're included. Almost at the same time, the few overlords glanced over. The overlord of Vermilion Cloud Valley shook his head repeatedly and the fats on his face jiggled. It's none of my business. You guys can fight however you like. The overlord of Vermilion Cloud Valley watched coldly from the sidelines. He had long seen through the stakes involved. Apart from revenge, the main reason why Levitating Goat Peak and Silvermoon Valley wanted to kill Su Zimo was because they felt threatened. A low-level fiend demon already possessed such terrifying combat strength. If they could not kill him while he was still weak, they would be doomed in the future. Furthermore, the overlords could tell that there was a high chance that Su Zimo possessed some sort of precious treasure. Disregarding everything else, just his physical body alone was a rare treasure. Of course, with the old ape and the overlord of Golden Flames Mountain around, it would be extremely difficult for the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak and the others to kill Su Zimo. The overlord of Vermilion Cloud Valley chose not to side with either side. No matter who won in the end, they would not target him. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak said slowly, Old monkey, I can compensate you with a perfect grade Tao Lord Dermic weapon if you give that demon's life to me. The demons were moved. Perfect grade Tao Lord Dermic weapons were extremely rare even in the cultivation world, let alone the world of demons that did not know how to refine weapons. The old ape laughed and shook his head. Even if you give me a Dermic treasure, it won't be worth his life, let alone a perfect grade Tao Lord Dermic weapon. Since that's the case, you can accompany him in death. The moment he said that, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak suddenly attacked. Opening his mouth, he spat out 2 spears that pierced towards the old ape's head. The moment the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak moved, the overlords of Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island and Confusion Mist Swamp attacked as well. A battle between the overlords had broken out. Chapter 863. After becoming an overlord, they had many fiend demons under their command and a vast territory. At their cultivation realm and status, they would not fight unless there was an irreconcilable feud. Who would have thought that a low-level fiend demon would be the cause of a battle between overlords? Scram! The old ape roared and his blood chi surged. Swinging his fists, he smashed them against the 2 incoming spears like a pair of stone hammers. Clang! The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak shuddered and his hand went numb, he nearly lost his grip on his spears. So strong! The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's heart skipped a beat. At the same time, the old ape swiped his waist and took out a pair of gigantic stone locks from his storage bag, waving them around. Clang! 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 The overlord of Silvermoon Valley's Saber, the overlord of Thousand Snake Island's Water Splitter and the overlord of Confusion Mist Swamp's Dark Golden Halberd were all repelled with sparks flying everywhere. The old ape summoned his destiny dermic weapon and was not disadvantaged against the four of them single-handedly. Kill them. The overlord of Silvermoon Valley raised his arm and shouted. The high-level fiend demons of Levitating Goat Peak, Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island and Confusion Mist Swamp charged out. There were more than 100 of them. As for Ape Chatter Ridge and Golden Flames Mountain, there were less than 30 high-level fiend demons. The difference in numbers of high-level fiend demons on both sides was several times. Watch out! Yuan Linger looked at Monkey and instructed. Then, she soared into the air and clashed with the high-level fiendish demons of the other party. The high-level fiend demons fought in midair. It was chaos on the plains as well. Many fiend demons took advantage of the chaos to rob. Monkey and the others were together and could protect themselves with Solitary Cloud by their side. Innate divine powers. Divine power. Inner strength. Swift movement. Bloodthirst. In midair, many high-level fiend demons reverted to their true forms and burst forth with extremely domineering powers of divine powers. The entire world was trembling. Unlike cultivators, demons would gain an initial understanding of the power of divine powers after becoming high-level fiend demons. The deeper their cultivation realms were, the stronger their divine powers would be. Most fiend demons could only inherit a single divine power. Very few fiendish demons could inherit 2 divine powers. Those that could inherit 3 types of supernatural powers were almost all the most powerful and terrifying beings in the world. For example, the ancient 9 races. The great battle in midair erupted with divine abilities. This meant that both sides weren't probing each other, already fighting with true flames. A high-level fiendish demon from Confusion Mist Swamp rushed forward with his divine power, wanting to fight the old ape head-on. Die! The old ape roared furiously and swung the stone lock down, smashing the fiend demon into smithereens. Although the old ape had white hair and fluttering brows, every single move he made was still capable of releasing shocking combat strength. The dignity of an overlord was not to be challenged. Even though their cultivation bases were the same, all of the high-tier fiendish demons present who dared to fight the old ape head-on would be defeated. In less serious cases, they were seriously injured and vomited blood. In serious cases, it was normal for them to perish. In that short period of time, almost 10 high-level fiend demons were killed by the old ape. Blood dyed the blue sky. Only the overlords of Levitating Goat Peak, Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island and Confusion Mist Swamp could fight against the old ape. Ha ha ha, awesome! The overlord of Golden Flames Mountain waved a gigantic black trident and was bathed in blood as he roared in laughter. Brother, you're really something. The overlords of Levitating Goat Peak, Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island and Confusion Mist Swamp exchanged glances. They finally realized one thing. Everyone had underestimated the old ape's combat strength. This old ape that seemed to be in his twilight years was still the most terrifying of the 7 overlords. The 4 overlords were getting anxious as they watched the high-level fiend demons die one after another. The losses were way too great. Was it worth it to suffer such heavy losses for the sake of a low-level fiend demon? The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak swept his gaze across the blood sea beneath and a cold glint flashed through his eyes. The objective of this battle was not for them to fight to the death. The main objective of this battle was for the fiend demon in the blood sea. The few of you, head to the blood sea and capture that little beast alive. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak changed his strategy immediately and ordered his 7 high-level fiend demons to enter the blood sea and capture Su Zimo. Let's see who can cross. The old ape's fur was already dyed blood red as he stood in front of the blood sea with a murderous aura, wielding a pair of blood-stained stone locks. Old ape, I don't have to defeat you. All I have to do is trap you for a moment. With a single thought from the overlord of levitating Goat Peak, a cage the size of a palm flew out of his storage bag and expanded with the wind, enveloping the old ape. The cage was grayish-white in color and it was unknown what fiend demon's bones it was made of. It exuded a sinister aura. The old ape frowned slightly and did not dare to be careless. Although he wielded the stone locks that weighed 5,000 kilograms, his movement technique was agile and he flashed continuously. In the blink of an eye, he had already vanished from the spot and darted to the other side. "Watch out!" the overlord of Golden Flames Mountain shouted. The old ape's heart sank. The moment he landed, a pair of white bone claws reached out from the mud below and gripped his ankles. That was the demonic art of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak. Instantly, the bone claws left 10 fingerprints on the old ape's ankles and his ankles turned purplish-green in a sinister manner. Shatter! The old ape stomped his feet on the ground and his chest ached with blood chi. His body expanded and blood chi spewed from his ankles as his flesh expanded. The tremendous power shattered the bone claws instantly. The purplish-green color around his ankles retreated gradually. Although he managed to dispel the demonic art, the bone cage in midair had already descended and trapped the old ape within. Break! The old ape growled deeply and wielded the stone locks. Releasing his divine powers, his strength surged and he smashed them against the few bones in front of him. The bone cage swayed and the bones vibrated endlessly, as though they were about to shatter. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak's expression changed starkly as he shouted hurriedly, "The three of you, help me. This old ape is way too strong." "All right." The overlord of Silvermoon Valley and the other two responded and released their spirit consciousnesses one after another into the bone cage. The old ape's stone locks smashed down once more. However, this time round, the bone cage shone brightly and repelled the old ape, causing him to crash against the bones of the cage behind him and fall. The old ape stood up and charged forward once more. However, he was repelled by the bone cage once more. The bone cage was a trump card of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak. Although it did not possess much killing power, it could trap someone within and make it difficult for them to break free. Furthermore, right now, the old ape was fighting against the four overlords of levitating Goat Peak and Silvermoon Valley. On the other side, the overlord of Golden Flames Mountain was also entangled by many high-level fiend demons and could not break free. 7 high-level fiend demons broke free and leaped into the gigantic vortex of the Blood Sea with lightning speed, vanishing without a trace. The 7 high-level fiend demons leaped into the Blood Sea and shrouded it with immense dermic powers. Even the frightening vortex was forced to stop. Peace returned to the Blood Sea. When they saw that, the demons lamented internally, "Mo is finished." There was a difference of 2 major cultivation realms between them. Even a single high-level fiend demon was enough to kill Mo, let alone 7. Chapter 864. A huge battle broke out outside the Blood Sea. Su Zimo, who was in the Blood Sea, was completely oblivious. Although it had not been long, the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra was extremely domineering. Under the channeling of the Fiend technique, he had already absorbed most of the energy that had accumulated in the Blood Sea for 1,000 years. After the scarlet-haired Een spirit broke through, the black-haired Essence spirit had already broken through to late-stage nascent soul. Energy surged into Su Zimo's body endlessly, tempering his body and refining his essence spirit. Under the baptism of the energy, his body became even stronger. His cultivation realm was rising rapidly as well. That was enough energy to provide for the cultivation of 10 top-tier mid-level fiend demons. But now, all of it was absorbed by Su Zimo. This kind of effect could be said to be universally shocking. Su Zimo growled deeply and his flesh expanded continuously. His body was growing uncontrollably as well. 10 feet. 20 feet. Before long, he was 50 feet tall. Moreover, this trend of growth showed no signs of stopping. If anyone was in the blood sea, they would be horrified to discover that Su Zimo's skin had already split open and streaks of blood filled his body in a frightening manner. It was as though his body could explode at any moment. In reality, it was fortunate that it was Su Zimo. If it was anyone else, they would have exploded a long time ago if they dared to absorb all the energy in the blood sea in such a short period of time. The blood in his body surged, and his powerful self-healing ability healed the wounds on his body. However, his wounds would tear open once more before they were truly healed. As his body grew, the number of wounds on his terrifyingly burly body increased. He was in immense pain. However, there was no pain in Su Zimo's eyes. Instead, they shone with a sinister hint of excitement. Peak late-stage nascent soul. With the push of such a massive amount of pure energy, his cultivation realm skyrocketed and he reached peak late-stage nascent soul within a short period of time. It was as though his body was filled with endless energy. The feeling of controlling power was amazing and intoxicating. The reason why many fiend techniques were called fiend techniques was because of their ferocious methods. Most of the time, one would be able to obtain immense strength within a short period of time after cultivating them. Along with the increase in strength, the cultivator's reliance on demonic arts would increase. Their foundations would become unstable, and their temperament would also begin to change. They had become cruel, bloodthirsty, and unscrupulous. In the end, he completely fell into depravity and fell into the demonic path. At this moment, Su Zimo was showing signs of falling into the demonic path. The blood refinement demonic art was tyrannical and strange. In the depths of his heart, he had always been conflicted. Therefore, most of the time, he would not use it. However, after killing the 6 people from Levitating Goat Peak, Su Zimo realized that he did not have much time left. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak and the others would soon find out about the situation within the Blood Sea. Therefore, if he wanted to devour the energy in the Blood Sea in the shortest time possible, he could only rely on the blood refinement demonic art. The situation was just as he had expected. Under the plundering of the blood refinement demonic technique, he had already devoured at least 80% of the energy in the Sea of Blood. As a result, his cultivation base rose rapidly. If one were to cultivate normally, it would take at least a few decades to reach the peak of the late nascent soul stage from the late nascent soul stage. However, with the boost of the blood refinement demonic art, Su Zimo arrived at that realm in less than 15 minutes. That was the terror of fiend techniques. Su Zimo licked his lips instinctively. His massive body stood tall in the blood sea and his eyes were bloodshot, resembling a fiend that had just walked out of hell. It was way too wonderful. In fact, a series of thoughts flashed through his mind. Charge out of the blood sea, kill all living beings and devour their bloodlines. As long as he refined enough fresh blood, he would be able to break through in the shortest time possible. Void reversion. Dharma Daojun. No one in this world would be able to stop him. This world would not be able to trap him either. With that, he would be able to catch up to Dai Yu at the fastest speed possible and even catch sight of her. What would Dai Yu's bloodline taste like? Just as that thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind, he jolted awake. He felt chills run down his spine and his hairs stood on end. Although he was in the blood sea, he was already drenched in cold sweat. It was way too scary. How could this be? Why would I have such thoughts? Su Zimo's eyes widened with shock and bewilderment. Although he had the same bloodthirst when he released the blood refinement fiend technique previously, it had never shaken his Tao heart. He possessed the essence of the immortal and Buddhist inheritances and cultivated the top cultivation techniques of the immortals and Buddhas. He had also chanted sutras and Buddha for 20 years at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley and severed his ties with the mortal world. Although the blood refinement fiend technique was domineering, it was not enough for him to sink into oblivion. However, just now, if he had not thought of harming Dai Yu in the end, he might not have woken up. In fact, there was a high chance that he would fall into the abyss of the fiend Tao forever, unable to extricate himself. Su Zimo felt a sense of lingering fear. Ma. Ni. Pa. Me. Sanskrit echoed in his mind. The black-haired essence spirit assumed a lotus position on the creation Qinglian and lowered its head like an old monk in meditation. It chanted Buddhist sutras and shone with a resplendent golden light. Resplendent lights shone in his consciousness with 1,000 streaks of auspicious colors, immortal qi and Buddhist light. Against the reverberation of the powerful Sanskrit, the scarlet glint in Su Zimo's eyes dissipated gradually and his mind regained clarity. Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and his gaze flickered. Just now, was it because he had released the blood refinement fiend technique too many times that a qualitative change occurred over time? Or was it because his Tao heart was unstable because his cultivation realm had risen too quickly? Or perhaps, there were other reasons. Su Zimo lowered his head slightly and looked at the bottomless blood sea beneath him. Suddenly, the sinister blood-colored human face flashed through his mind. That face seemed to be smiling at him. A sinister and terrifying aura emanated from the blood sea that sent chills down one's spine. Su Zimo shook his head. Right then, a commotion broke out from the surface of the sea. Splash! Splash! Accompanied by the sound of water, about 7 figures dived into the blood sea and sped in his direction with an incomparably domineering aura. They're high-level fiend demons. Su Zimo sensed for a moment and was alarmed. He took a closer look and realized that all 7 high-level fiend demons should have come from Levitating Goat Peak, none of them were from Ape Chatter Ridge or Golden Flames Mountain. Something big had happened. Before long, Su Zimo realized that something huge must have happened outside the blood sea. What should he do? Su Zimo's mind raced as he looked at the 7 figures approaching rapidly. Although he had many trump cards, there were almost none that could truly threaten high-level fiend demons. Although Baron of the Mystic Classic of the 12 Demon Kings of the Great Wilderness could affect high-level fiend demons, it was not significant. He had only comprehended the surface of Baron and had yet to truly comprehend its essence. Even if he released it against high-level fiend demons at close range, he would only be able to reduce their lifespans by 100 years per breath. For high-level fiendish demons who had a lifespan of 10,000 years, losing 100 years of lifespan in one breath did not affect them much. However, a single breath was enough for high-level fiend demons to kill him 10 times over. Chapter 865. Escape. That was the only way to survive. They were 2 major cultivation realms apart and the difference in strength was immense. If he wanted to escape from the pursuit of a high-level fiendish demon, ordinary movement techniques would not work. Only blood escape would have a chance of survival. Right then, Su Zimo swept his gaze and caught sight of an extremely frightening scene. One after another, gigantic bubbles floated from the depths of the blood sea. It was as though there was a living being lurking in the depths of the dark sea that exhaled upwards. The 7 high-level fiend demons in the sea caught sight of that as well, but they did not take it to heart. The 7 high-level fiend demons surrounded Su Zimo in the middle with indifferent expressions and cold gazes, as though they were looking at a dead man. The gigantic bubbles floated from the depths of the sea. Some of them brushed past Su Zimo and some of them engulfed the 7 fiend demons. The 7 of them were caught off guard. Or rather, there was truly no need to be on guard against a single bubble. Su Zimo looked at the 7 high-level fiend demons that were engulfed by the bubbles and suddenly felt uneasy. Right in front of him, one of the fiend demons in the bubbles exploded into a blood mist. Pust! Su Zimo was shocked and nearly sucked in a mouthful of seawater. He was dead. A high-level fiend demon with combat strength equivalent to the Dharma Dao Jun of the human race had died in front of Su Zimo so easily with his essence spirit destroyed. Initially, the gigantic bubble was transparent. However, at that moment, the bubble was dyed red by the blood mist spewing out of the fiend demon's body. The blood bubble did not explode and continued to float upwards. Su Zimo felt his neck stiffen and his limbs turn cold. A chill crept up his spine and his scalp tingled. Poof! 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 Immediately after, Su Zimo heard the sound of something exploding. The sound was like a death sentence that caused his heart to shudder. Su Zimo thought of a possibility and held his breath, turning around slowly. Although he was prepared, his heart still skipped a beat and his pupils constricted. As expected, the 6 high-level fiend demons that surrounded him initially had already vanished, leaving behind 6 gigantic blood-colored bubbles that floated up slowly. They were all dead. The moment the 7 high-level fiend demons entered the Blood Sea, they were engulfed by the gigantic bubble that appeared out of nowhere and were destroyed in both body and spirit. A huge wave of fear welled up in his heart. Up until now, Su Zimo had risen from nothing. He had defeated all the geniuses and defeated all the powerful enemies. He was invincible among those of the same level. He had escaped death several times, and had even fallen into a forbidden area like the Dragon Bone Valley, but he had never felt such fear. Just now, that bubble had brushed past him. Was it a coincidence or something else? Su Zimo didn't dare to continue thinking about it. He paused for a moment, and then his figure flashed as he sped towards the sea. Above the Blood Sea, the 4 overlords of Levitating Goat Peak, Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island and Confusion Mist Swamp formed a bone prison at the same time, trapping the old ape within. The old ape tried his best but was unable to break free. As for the 4 overlords, they could not injure the old ape within the bone prison as well. On the surface, both sides were in a stalemate. However, everyone could tell that the old ape was in a passive position. As long as the 7 high-level fiend demons that entered the Blood Sea captured Su Zimo, the old ape would have no choice but to admit defeat. The battle was still ongoing. However, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak and the others frowned slightly. The 7 high-level fiend demons had already entered the Blood Sea for a while. Why was there no sign of them yet? Did the 7 of them have to take so long to take down a single low-level fiend demon? Right then, the 7 overlords seemed to have sensed something and turned towards the Blood Sea not far away. The surface of the sea was calm without any waves. All of a sudden, a blood-colored bubble rose from the surface of the sea and exploded. A corpse could be vaguely seen within before disappearing swiftly into the depths of the sea. That corpse, the overlords present frowned slightly. Although they could not see its appearance, the shape of the corpse seemed to belong to one of the 7 high-level fiend demons. Immediately after, blood-colored bubbles rose from the surface of the sea one after another. They exploded at the same time. 6 corpses could be vaguely seen. Including the corpse from before, there were a total of 7 corpses. This time round, the 7 overlords could see clearly that the 7 corpses corresponded to the 7 high-level fiend demons that entered the Blood Sea. Almost instantly, the frightening legends of the 1,000-year Blood Sea flashed through the minds of the demons one after another. There were very few people who took those legends seriously. However, at that moment, the demons realized that the legends might be real. Many fiend demons shuddered and moved instinctively, distancing themselves from the Blood Sea. Splash! Suddenly, there was the sound of water splashing. A tall figure leaped out of the Blood Sea. The demons were in an uproar. Even high-level fiend demons died within. Who would have thought that there would be someone alive within the Blood Sea? If there was a living person that escaped from the Blood Sea, the most likely possibility was that he was the existence that killed the 7 high-level fiend demons. Who wouldn't be wary of such a mysterious and powerful existence? The demons exclaimed and fled in all directions. Even the overlords present retreated instinctively. In the blink of an eye, there was not a single fiend demon that lingered above the Blood Sea, forming an empty region. That person looks familiar. He seems to be, heavens, it's Mo. He's still alive. A series of exclamations could be heard from the demons. A figure that was 100 feet tall stood above the Blood Sea like a fiend celestial with shoulder-length scarlet hair. His eyes were deep and blood chi filled the air with a torrential aura. Although his body had changed quite a bit, his appearance was undoubtedly Su Zimo and the demons recognized him right away. The overlords of Levitating Goat Peak and the other overlords had grim expressions and did not charge forward right away. They could not figure out who this Emo before them was and what sort of powerful methods he possessed. One after another, spirit consciousnesses swept over. Before long, the demons sensed Su Zimo's cultivation. Although his cultivation had increased, he was still a low-level fiend demon. The overlords of Levitating Goat Peak and the others exchanged glances and reacted quickly. The deaths of the 7 high-level fiend demons should have nothing to do with this MO. It might have been a fluke that this demon managed to escape from the Blood Sea alive. That was because they could see a hint of panic and fear in Su Zimo's eyes as well. At that thought, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak revealed a murderous expression and hollered, "The 3 of you, trap that old ape. I'll go kill that little beast." The moment he said that, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak vanished from the spot in a flash. "Old goat, how dare you!" The old ape roared and charged towards the bone cage once more. Boom! The bone cage swayed, but it was not damaged. Although the dermic powers of the bone cage were weakened significantly with one less spirit consciousness, it was still augmented by the full might of the overlords of Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island and Confusion Mist Swamp. It was extremely difficult for the old ape to break free within a short period of time. After leaving the Blood Sea, Su Zimo calmed down quickly when he caught sight of the situation before him. The old ape was trapped and the overlord of Golden Flames Mountain could not break free. If the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was bent on killing him, nobody could save him. At that thought, Su Zimo made a prompt decision and turned to flee. The moment the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's killing intent rose, Su Zimo had already escaped. "Stop him!" The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak hollered. More than 10 high-level fiend demons had already freed themselves and lunged towards Su Zimo. Chapter 866. You must be dreaming if you want to escape right under my nose. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak sneered internally. The moment more than 10 high-level fiend demons moved, they saw a streak of blood light flash through the air at an extremely fast speed. Su Zimo had already vanished from the spot. Blood escape. So fast. The demons were alarmed. Some of the high-level fiend demons were decisive and attacked right away. Yellow sand rumbled and mud flew. A tornado that connected heaven and earth was formed on the plains with a massive might that swept towards Su Zimo. Swash! A saber made of dermic powers descended from the skies, as though it wanted to slice the voids into two. Dermic powers surged and surged. Instantly, more than 10 demonic arts descended and almost drowned Su Zimo. Apart from demonic arts, there were even spirit consciousness attacks that blanketed the area. Be it the fiend demons on the plains or the fiend demons fighting in midair, all of them turned their gazes over. They wanted to see the outcome of this ambush. Young Master. First. Little Fox, Linghu, and the others were shocked and exclaimed. Swoosh. The blood light tore through the air and escaped 1,000 kilometers away. The speed of the blood light was way too fast. The demonic arts of the high-level fiend demons were a step slower. Even their essence spirit secret skills could not catch up to the blood light. After chasing for 1,000 kilometers, their spirit consciousnesses were depleted. In the blink of an eye, the blood light had already escaped to the horizons. Thankfully, they were on a boundless plain with a wide field of vision. Otherwise, there was a high chance that the demons would have lost track of Su Zimo. The entire process happened too quickly and most of the fiend demons on the battlefield had only just realized what was going on. Roar! The old ape roared and his body expanded. His blood chi rumbled and his snow-white brows turned scarlet. Lend me your rod. The old ape hollered and his spirit consciousness swept out. Monkey on the plains felt his hands lighten and imminent turned into a streak of golden light. Instantly, it entered the bone cage in midair and was gripped tightly by the old ape. Break through. The old ape wielded the rod with both hands and his terrifying spirit consciousness surged into imminent. Golden light erupted, illuminating the world. The old ape swung Qianjun and smashed it heavily on the bone prison. Boom! An earth-shattering boom rang out. Ka ka ka. Immediately after, cracks appeared on the surface of the bone cage and expanded continuously. The overlords of Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island and Confusion Mist Swamp shuddered with horrified expressions. They had almost lost control of the bone prison. When he saw that, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak hesitated for a moment before a resolute look flashed through his eyes as he hollered, "You guys hang in there first. I'll go kill that little bastard to prevent any future troubles." Before he could finish his sentence, his figure flickered, and his eyes were filled with killing intent as he chased after the bloody light. He was very clear that if he let Su Zimo go this time, he would definitely become a great threat in the future. More than 10 high-level fiend demons followed closely behind with all their might. However, the distance between them and the blood-red light in front of them was constantly increasing. Their hearts were filled with astonishment. One had to know that there was a difference of 2 great realms between them. Their strength was absolutely overwhelming, but they still couldn't catch up to Su Zimo. What sort of escape technique was that for it to possess such shocking speed? In less than 15 minutes, they had already lost track of Su Zimo completely. The wind howled in his ears and the shadows of the trees retreated continuously. Right now, Su Zimo was no longer releasing blood escape. Instead, it was a grand blood escape that was channeled by his essence spirit, condensed dermic powers and ignited his bloodline at the same time. Compared to blood escape, grand blood escape was faster and more explosive. That was also the reason why he was able to break out of the encirclement and even shake off the high-level fiend demons behind him. Su Zimo calmed down slightly and did not stop in his tracks immediately, continuing to sprint. The distance between the two of them was not far enough. The stench of blood on him was extremely heavy and the only way he could escape a certain distance away from the high-level fiend demons would be able to catch up to him. Suddenly, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat, as though he sensed something. Frowning slightly, Su Zimo turned back and his pupils constricted. A few thousand feet behind him, a tall and skinny figure was chasing him relentlessly on the wind. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. Su Zimo frowned and was secretly shocked. To think that even though he managed to shake off the high-level fiend demons, he could not shake off the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. The distance between the two of them did not decrease. However, it was almost impossible for him to shake off the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak at that speed. What Su Zimo did not know was that the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was even more shocked than him. Initially, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was rather disdainful when he saw Su Zimo escape. That was because he had once obtained an escape technique from a beast bone in an ancient ruin. Once released, one's movement speed would be extremely fast like lightning and could chase after the stars and moons. Among the 7 overlords, he might not be the strongest in terms of combat strength. However, there was no doubt that he was the strongest in terms of movement techniques. In his opinion, it would only take him a few breaths to catch up to Su Zimo. But now, both of them had already sprinted for an hour and had long shaken off the high-level fiend demons behind them. However, he still could not catch up to Su Zimo. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak had a grim expression. Dermic powers surged into his body endlessly from heaven and earth as he tailed Su Zimo from afar without slacking off at all. Who knew how many secrets this low-level fiend demon had? The potential of this demon seemed to be limitless and the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was extremely wary of him. Now, he was even more determined to kill Su Zimo. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's gaze was cold as he chased after Su Zimo while hollering, "Little beast, you won't be able to survive today no matter where you go." Su Zimo did not reply and merely continued on his way. Fufu, why aren't you saying anything? The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak sneered and said sinisterly, you should know that your actions right now are futile. This is your final struggle. Su Zimo knew that the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was trying to distract him with his words. If he showed any signs of fear, hesitation or trepidation, his speed would definitely decrease. At that time, it would be the time of his death. However, Su Zimo was even clearer that the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was not trying to scare him. There was almost no chance of him surviving if he was targeted by an overlord. There was a hint of mockery in the eyes of the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak as he said coldly, "Little beast, that escape technique of yours is way too heaven-defying. I'm sure it's extremely taxing on your body. You won't be able to last long." As an overlord of a region, he did not live his thousands of years for nothing. Although he did not know anything about blood escape, he could almost deduce the truth. Su Zimo pursed his lips tightly and remained silent. To be fair, even without the side effects of blood escape, he was not a match for an overlord in terms of stamina and dermic powers alone. Both of them continued sprinting one after another. Perhaps because too much time had passed, Su Zimo's speed had truly decreased and the distance between them was closing as well. When he saw that, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was even more certain that his deduction was right. "Don't worry, little beast. I'm not in a hurry." The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak revealed a mocking expression as though he was a cat playing with a mouse as he roared in laughter. "I'll take my time and you won't be able to last long. Ha 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 ha." The moment he said that, the distance between them seemed to have shortened once more. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak focused his gaze and could clearly see that Su Zimo's green robes were drenched in sweat. His ears twitched and he could even hear Su Zimo's heavy panting. That was a sign of exhaustion. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was completely relieved. In his eyes, Su Zimo was already a bird in a cage that could not escape. Chapter 867. The distance between the two of them was closing rapidly. Su Zimo's figure staggered slightly, as though he had expended all his stamina. Furthermore, he was deeply affected by the side effects of blood escape. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak had a mocking gaze and let out a mocking and cruel smile. It was as though he could see the panic, fear and helplessness on Su Zimo's face right now. However, in reality, Su Zimo's back was facing him. If the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak could see Su Zimo's face, he would be shocked to discover that the panic, fear and helplessness that he had imagined was nowhere to be seen on that delicate face. There was only a single expression on that face, calmness. The more dangerous the situation, the calmer one should be. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was filled with killing intent. At that moment, Su Zimo's eyes were filled with endless killing intent as well. Given his capabilities, it was impossible for him to shake off the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. The only way to survive was to kill the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. Kill an overlord. Such a thought could be said to be extremely daring. Even the old ape and the others who were overlords did not have the confidence to kill an overlord, let alone a low-level fiend demon. However, Su Zimo had the audacity to kill. It was not as though he had no chance at all. There was no way he could take on an overlord head-on. However, he had many trump cards with him. Among them, the most important trump card was the divine phoenix bone that Dai Yu left in his body. In the cultivation world, it was no longer a secret that he had the divine phoenix bone with him and many cultivators knew about it. Back then, Xuanyu Daoran of Glass Palace chased after him in the Great Qian ruins and even intentionally avoided the divine phoenix bone to snap his wrist. However, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak did not know about it. He did not even know about Su Zimo's background, let alone the existence of the divine phoenix bone. Once the power of the divine phoenix bone was released, it could definitely threaten the life of the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. This was a huge gamble. If he won, everything would be fine. However, if he lost, Su Zimo would lose his life as well. He had no other choice. Even with a treasure like the divine phoenix bone, wanting to kill an overlord was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Only by catching them off guard could they succeed. Therefore, the sweat and exhaustion on Su Zimo's body were all just an act. His motive was to numb the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak had guessed correctly. The burden on Su Zimo from using the blood escape art was indeed huge. It would also have severe side effects. But there was one thing he had missed. Su Zimo had just come out of the blood sea, and an enormous amount of bloodline energy had accumulated in his body. Su Zimo's body was almost saturated. This energy could not be released in a short period of time. It was surging in his body. If this continued, his physical body would explode. Instead, the blood escape grand art had given this energy a way to escape. Therefore, when the blood escape art burned his bloodline, it was precisely this energy that was consumed. As for Su Zimo, he was almost completely unaffected. The distance between the two sides was getting closer and closer. 100 zhang. 500 feet. 10 zhang. Su Zimo did not make a move and his gaze turned colder. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak did not make a move as well. In his eyes, Su Zimo was already a dead man. He was in no hurry and merely closed in with the intention of toying with the other party. In the blink of an eye, he was 50 feet away. This was a relatively close distance. However, Su Zimo endured it and continued waiting. He wanted to wait for the perfect opportunity to kill the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak in a single strike. 30 feet, 20 feet, 10 feet. The distance between the two of them was only 10 feet. It was almost as though they were within reach. Right then, Su Zimo's eyes flashed with decisiveness and viciousness. Suddenly, he turned around and his scarlet hair danced. His gaze was like lightning as he roared at the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. Roar! A phantom of a dragon appeared behind Su Zimo and coiled upwards. An earth-shaking dragon roar could be heard from his mouth. At the same time, Su Zimo's right eye shone with a bedazzling brilliance that intensified like a blazing sun. He released his voice and visual technique at the same time. Both of those secret skills were instantaneous and were Su Zimo's strongest trump cards. There was no way he could defend against them at this distance. If it was any other high-level fiend demon, they would most likely be flustered or even severely injured against such a change. However, Su Zimo was facing an overlord. Dragons? The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak frowned. In the blink of an eye, he suddenly raised his palm and placed it in front of his body, narrowly intercepting the blazing beam of light that shot towards him from midair. Shing! A green smoke rose from the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's palm. The might of Illumination Eye was frightening and even pierced the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's flesh. However, the beam of light dissipated instantly after being tainted by the bloodline of an overlord. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak merely suffered superficial injuries and the two secret skills were neutralized with ease. To be fair, indeed, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak hesitated for a moment when he heard the deafening dragon roar. Dragons were one of the primordial 9 races. Even if the dragons before him had an impure bloodline and were only remnant beasts, he was not someone he could afford to offend. However, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak made his decision before long. Kill! The feud between them was already formed. If he were to let Su Zimo escape this time round, he would truly be releasing a dragon into the seas instead of letting a tiger return to the mountains. As long as he could kill this demon stealthily and erase all traces, the dragons would not be able to say anything even if they came knocking on his door. Furthermore, dragons were filled with treasures. If he could make good use of this opportunity, it would be a massive opportunity. He might be able to become the first among the 7 overlords to become a grand demon by drinking dragon blood, eating dragon meat and absorbing dragon marrow. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's gaze turned fervent. The moment the two secret skills were released, Su Zimo narrowed his gaze and suddenly reached out with his right hand, forming a claw and grabbing towards the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's face. He had long expected that his voice and visual technique might not be able to injure the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. Those two secret skills were merely distractions. His true killing move was his Divine Phoenix hand. However, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was unaware of that. To him, Su Zimo's grab posed no threat at all. It was more like the final struggle of a trapped beast. "Are you going to give up?" The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak sneered and said unhurriedly, "I heard that your physique is extremely strong and you're ferocious in melee combat. Today, I'll show you what true strength is." The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak did not dodge or retreat. He extended his palm and clenched it into a fist as well, punching viciously towards Su Zimo's extended palm. Boom! The fist and palm collided. An incomparably domineering power struck Su Zimo's right hand and fresh blood splattered. Instantly, his palm was smashed into a bloody mess. That power triggered the Divine Phoenix bone in his right hand as well. Screech! In midair, a strange phoenix cry rang out. It pierced through gold and cracked stone, carrying with it endless majesty. A dragon's roar and a phoenix's cry. They sounded from the same person at the same time. Where did that phoenix cry come from? The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's gaze flickered and he suddenly felt uneasy. Immediately after, he sensed a shuddering aura that seemed like it could incinerate all life and destroy all living beings. Chapter 868. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's eyes widened in shock and his pupils had already constricted to the size of a needle. Su Zimo's right hand had already vanished completely. In its place was a gigantic and menacing claw that was scarlet and almost transparent, burning with shocking divine flames. The divine flames danced and the voids distorted, burning so much that cracks appeared one after another. This claw that was burning with divine flames seemed to have come from a true deity, and it could burn this entire world into ashes. While the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was shocked, Su Zimo's heart shuddered as well. Back in the elementary ancient battlefield, he was still a Foundation establishment cultivator and managed to kill perfected Jean Dan with the help of the Divine Phoenix Bone. At that time, the Divine Phoenix Bone had yet to appear completely. It was a blood-red bone palm and he could vaguely make out the shape of his right hand. But now, a menacing claw had replaced his wrist. It was surrounded by divine flames and seemed as though it could incinerate all life with a flip of its palm. The Divine Phoenix Bone that was left in his palm had finally revealed its true form. Even at nascent soul realm, Su Zimo was still unable to utilize the power of the Divine Phoenix Bone. That was the reason why he took the risk and made use of the power of the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak to stimulate the Divine Phoenix Bone and trigger its retaliation. However, this scene was even more terrifying than he had imagined. Although he had not seen the Divine Phoenix personally, Su Zimo believed that the claw before him was the true Divine Phoenix's claw. There were no dermic arts or secret skills that could match the power of the Divine Phoenix's claw. Above it was the power of a god. A single claw could penetrate and incinerate everything. The Divine Phoenix's claw descended and the aura of a divine being spread. Everything in the world seemed to have vanished and returned to chaos. The divine flames dispersed the chaos and lit up the universe. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was shocked and his eyes were filled with endless fear. That power was enough to destroy him. Furthermore, he could not summon any thoughts of resisting against the Divine Phoenix's claw. This aura was absolutely majestic, absolutely dominating. In fact, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak could even sense the wrath of the Divine Phoenix's claw. That was because he was the one who alarmed the Divine Phoenix's claw and ignited its divine flames. The dignity of a divine being was not to be offended. One had to bear the consequences of offending a divine being. If it was any other high-level fiend demon, it wouldn't be enough even if they were killed dozens of times by the divine phoenix's claw. At that moment of life and death, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak calmed down swiftly and displayed the reaction and decisiveness of an overlord. He bit his tongue and spat out a stream of blood essence blood. At Su Zimo's claw, Destiny's claws. Under normal circumstances, be it cultivators or fiend demons, the power of their essence spirit and mental state was limited and they could only refine a single destiny dermic weapon. Therefore, most Yang's claw. That was not the overlord of's. S. This was a greater demon bone shield. As its name bones. Takes heaven, and earths with heaven and heaven. Every single inch of bone was tempered by heaven and earth dermic powers and was indestructible. This great demon's bone shield had accompanied him for thousands of years and saved his life countless times. It was also because of this great demon's bone shield that he was able to reach where he was today and stand as an overlord. When the great demon's bone shield was brought out, the blood essence of the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's tongue landed on it. The aura of the bone shield expanded rapidly like a gigantic, white stone door. With a loud bang, it fell between the two of them and blocked the divine phoenix's claw. Clang! The claw of the divine phoenix collided against the great demon's bone shield and let out the sound of metal clashing. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak made use of that opportunity to retreat. At the same time, he flipped his palm and slapped down viciously towards Su Zimo's head. That was the methods of an overlord. While retreating, he did not give his opponent any chance and even wanted to kill him with his palm. They were way too close. The fact that it was difficult for the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak to escape unscathed also meant that there was no way Su Zimo could dodge the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's killing move. Su Zimo jerked his head backward and leaned back with all his might to avoid being struck at his vitals. His blood chi rumbled with a terrifying aura. Roar! A dragon's roar sounded. It was loud and resonant with an ancient aura, as though it was a roar from the primordial era. Instantly, the world quaked and the weather changed. Su Zimo's tendons and bones rang at the same time and his body transformed rapidly. His bones mutated and his flesh expanded, growing scales all over his body. Dragonification. After half a year, Su Zimo had transformed into a dragon once more. However, it was different from his dragonification in Myriad Phenomenon City. Perhaps it was because of the transformation of the divine phoenix bone, the dragon scales on his body were no longer green. There was a hint of scarlet on them. Furthermore, flames danced between the gaps between the scales. His scarlet hair danced and the aura of the dragon and phoenix emanated from his body in a terrifying manner. The difference between the two of them was way too great. Su Zimo knew that even in dragonification, it was difficult for him to fight against an overlord in terms of strength. However, after dragonification, his body was covered in dragon scales and his defense increased tremendously. That was the reason why he could survive against the destructive power of an overlord. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's palm missed Su Zimo's head and pushed down, slamming heavily against Su Zimo's chest. Bang! There was a deafening sound. Su Zimo's figure was sent flying as endless blood splattered from his body. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak retreated and escaped from the range of the divine phoenix's claw. The entire process happened in the blink of an eye. However, both parties had exchanged multiple blows and executed killing moves. Any mistake would have resulted in death on the spot. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak had a grim expression and panted heavily. He had escaped. When he recalled the terrifying claw that burned with divine flames just now, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak felt a lingering fear. This was truly a narrow escape from death. If he had reacted any slower, he would have been crushed beneath the divine phoenix's claw and turned into ashes. However, Although he was out of danger for the moment, he could not retract his palm that struck the divine phoenix's claw in time. The flesh on his palm burned rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, it had turned into ashes. That palm was completely crippled. The overlord of levitating goat Peak grit his teeth with a venomous gaze. The immense pain on his palm stimulated his mind and caused the hatred in his heart to reach its peak. Just as he was about to move, he grunted, and blood drained from his face. The overlord of levitating goat Peak opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood, turning much weaker. He opened his eyes and looked over. His destiny dermic weapon, the great demon bone shield, had fallen to the ground and was penetrated by the divine phoenix's claw. The hole in the great demon bone shield was still burning with flames and showed no signs of extinguishing. The divine flames did not stop and the hole was still expanding. The bone shield that was comparable to a Khanate Dao Lord dermic weapon was completely crippled. Right then, the overlord of levitating goat Peak thought of something terrifying and lowered his head instinctively. His palm was already burned to ashes. However, there was still a small cluster of flames around his wrist. And this ball of flame was spreading towards his arm at an astonishing speed. It kept expanding and burning fiercely. Chapter 869. The divine flames burned furiously without end. Ah! The overlord of levitating goat Peak hollered and his blood chi rumbled. A blood mist surged towards the wound on his severed arm. Sizzle! However, the moment his blood reached his severed arm, it was burned into ashes by the divine flames before it could spray out, turning into wisps of green smoke. Swoosh! Boundless dermic powers rumbled and crushed towards the divine flames. The divine flames flickered and burned the dermic powers, causing them to dissipate instantly. No matter how the overlord of levitating goat Peak channeled his bloodline and dermic powers, he could not extinguish the divine flames on his arm. It was only at this moment that the overlord of levitating goat Peak felt a heart-wrenching pain that was unbearable. He was sweating profusely and could only watch helplessly as his arm was devoured by the divine flames bit by bit. The overlord of levitating goat Peak almost fainted from the pain. In the blink of an eye, the divine flames had already reached his elbow and showed no signs of extinguishing. Instead, they burned even more fiercely. If he did not have any other methods, the divine flames would spread from his arm to his body and even burn his body into ashes. The overlord of levitating goat Peak grit his teeth and a vicious glint flashed through his eyes. All of a sudden, he took out a long saber with a cold glint from his storage bag. With a cold expression, he channeled his dermic powers and slashed down viciously at his own shoulder blade. Exclamation point. A blood mist spewed out. A burning arm was tossed high into the air before falling to the ground and was burned into ashes before long. The overlord of levitating goat Peak's body swayed and his face turned paler. Severed arm. In order to protect his body, he had personally chopped off his arm. It was way too ruthless. Without that ruthless decisiveness, he would not have been able to survive till this day. In the grass not far away, Su Zimo was in excruciating pain and his bones felt like they were about to fall apart. The dragon scales on his body had already faded and his chest was a bloody mess. Thankfully, he managed to transform into a dragon at the final moment. Otherwise, the overlord of levitating goat Peak's palm strike would have pierced his chest. The magic power contained in it could even penetrate his body and easily enter his sea of consciousness to destroy his origin soul. Even though he managed to defend against the palm strike of the overlord of levitating goat Peak, he did not have much combat strength left. To be more precise, he didn't even have the strength to escape. Su Zimo struggled to stand up. The divine phoenix's claw had already disappeared and his right hand was back to normal. His chi and blood flowed as he worked hard to heal his internal injuries. He looked at the severed arm of the overlord of levitating goat Peak and sighed to himself in pity. In the end, he was still one step behind. An overlord was much more difficult to deal with than he had imagined. He was also much stronger. Su Zimo wanted to retreat. He seemed to be in a sorry state when he used blood escape to escape, but everything was under his control. It was to the extent where at the final juncture, he developed killing intent towards an overlord, wishing to defy the heavens and kill him here. Unfortunately, he didn't succeed in the end. Now that even the divine phoenix's claw could not kill the overlord of levitating Goat Peak, he could only retreat. He no longer had any trump cards that could threaten an overlord. However, he still had the 2 talismans given to him by the old monk at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley in his storage bag, the Major and Minor Transference Talisman. The Major Transference Talisman was refined by a talisman grandmaster hired by the Great Qian Empire in the past. It could allow one to cross major regions and teleport back to the Great Qian Imperial Palace. However, this was not the right time to release the Major Transference Talisman. The situation at the Thousand Demon Meet was unclear. Monkey and the others' fates were unknown as well, and he was worried. Moreover, if he were to suddenly leave, Monkey and the others would probably go crazy without knowing what was going on. Who knew how much trouble it would cause? The Minor Transference Talisman could allow one to teleport freely. Although the distance wouldn't be too far, it would at least allow him to escape from the danger before him. Back then, Lin Xuanji made use of a Minor Transference Talisman to bring him and the Night Spirit out of one of the forbidden grounds, the Dragon Bone Valley. Su Zimo reached for his storage bag with a thought. Right at this moment, a sudden change occurred. Before Su Zimo's palm touched his storage bag, he saw demonic chi rumbling before him as a gigantic anaconda burst out from the ground, baring its fangs and flicking its scarlet tongue. Pust! Su Zimo was alarmed. He was struck in the chest by the overlord of levitating Goat Peak and his organs were severely injured. Even if he could react in time, his body was a step slower. The anaconda coiled around his ankle rapidly and coiled around Su Zimo, binding him to the spot. The demonic chi dissipated. Su Zimo lowered his head and saw that the anaconda was transformed from a rope dermic weapon that was released by the overlord of levitating Goat Peak a long time ago. The moment Su Zimo stood up, the dermic weapon had already descended and bound him tightly. Although the overlord of levitating Goat Peak was careless initially and had one of his arms crippled by Su Zimo, he was way more experienced and capable now that he was going all out. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. He had not expected the counterattack of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak to be so decisive with so many methods. He tried to retract his tendons and bones, but the rope around him constricted as well, not giving him any chance to break free. If he was not wrong, the rope should be made from the tendons of some python race and was extremely resilient. Once he was bound, his dermic powers would be sealed and there was no way he could break free. The Minor Transference Talisman was in the storage bag on his waist. However, Su Zimo's hands were bound by the python tendon and his dermic powers were sealed, he could not touch it at all. The situation took a turn for the worse. The current situation was beyond his control. It would be great if he won against an overlord. However, if he lost and died, the price to pay was way too great. Su Zimo no longer had the mood to regret and could only think of a way to escape. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak walked over slowly with a cold gaze. He glared at the slightly delicate face not far away and his heart was filled with endless hatred. No matter what, he had won this battle. However, the entire process was extremely perilous. He nearly died in the hands of a low-level fiend demon. Furthermore, he had lost an arm in order to kill a low-level fiend demon. That was a price that was way too great. Before long, the overlord of levitating Goat Peak's gaze turned fervent. If he could make use of everything on Mo, including his blood, flesh, marrow and secret skills, he would be able to break through his cultivation realm and cultivate to become a grand demon and regrow his arm and body. At that time, he would be the true winner. In the blink of an eye, the overlord of levitating Goat Peak had already arrived before Su Zimo. He was tall and skinny as he looked down at Su Zimo from above. There was a hint of coldness, excitement and cruelty in his eyes. He was not worried about Su Zimo's counterattack at all. That was because Su Zimo could not attack at all while he was bound by the python tendon. Furthermore, after the exchange just now, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak no longer underestimated the other party. Even against Su Zimo, who was resigned to his fate, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was still wary. Chapter 870. As the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak closed in step by step, Su Zimo still could not think of a way to escape. However, there was no panic in his eyes. Since he could not escape, he could only fight to the death. Given his character, he would definitely not allow himself to be captured. As though he sensed something, the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak paused in his tracks. Su Zimo's expression was cold and a killing intent flashed through his eyes. His glabella shone and a gigantic bronze square tripod suddenly flew out. The tripod was rusty and filled with cracks. It looked ancient and desolate, no one knew how long it had been around. The void trembled when the bronze square tripod descended. It howled and smashed towards the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak viciously. Immediately after, a green lotus platform that was as clear as jade appeared. 5 layers of gigantic petals bloomed with a resplendent glow. Chaos chi spread and crushed down on the head of the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. A trapped beast is still putting up a fight. Shatter. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was prepared and harumphed coldly. Extending his fist, he channeled his blood chi and took the bronze square tripod head-on. Ugh! The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's expression changed and he grunted dully, retreating half a step back. Under normal circumstances, he would be able to shatter a perfected Lord Dermic weapon used by low-level fiend demons casually. Even Dao being Dermic weapons might not be able to withstand his Dermic powers. Furthermore, the tripod before him looked battered and the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak thought that he would be able to shatter it with a casual punch. However, he did not expect the bronze square tripod to be indestructible and turn his fist bone into a bloody mess instead. It's just some superficial injuries. There's nothing to fear. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak reacted extremely quickly and pressed his fist against the bronze tripod gently, pushing it away. At the same time, he slapped his storage bag with a single hand and withdrew a saber. Slashing upwards, he slashed the creation Qinglian. Clang! The creation Qinglian was sent flying. A series of cracks appeared on the surface of the saber as well. After pausing for a moment, it shattered with a bang. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak narrowed his eyes. Although his saber was only an ordinary Dao Lord Dermic weapon, it was not something that any weapon could shatter. This Qinglian was not simple. Another treasure. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak nodded secretly. The more treasures Su Zimo had, the more tricks he had, the more excited he became. The reason being that he was going to take away all the treasures and methods. Creation Qinglian was repelled by the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's saber. However, a series of green lights burst forth from the middle of her lotus platform. 45 lotus seeds burst forth with a green light that streaked with an endless sharpness, piercing towards the consciousness of the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak as though it could slice through the voids. This was a killer move that targeted the primordial spirit directly. Su Zimo realized that the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak's essence spirit was at its weakest after his destiny Dermic weapon was destroyed. Since he was trapped by the python tendon, the only things he could use were the 2 destiny Dermic artifacts in his sea of consciousness. Petty tricks. The overlord of Levitating Goat Peak sneered and his glabella shone. Suddenly, a terrifying spirit consciousness was released and the waves of spirit consciousness were almost corporeal. Ripples appeared in the air. Before the 45 green lights could penetrate the consciousness, they were repelled by the ripples. Although the essence spirit of the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak was weak, it was the essence spirit of a high-level fiend demon after all. Its strength was not to be underestimated and was difficult to deal with. After releasing that spirit consciousness attack, the aura of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak was clearly much weaker as well, and he panted heavily. The eyes of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak shone with excitement. The green lotus platform was mysterious and mysterious. Not only was it powerful, the lotus seeds within could even attack the essence spirit. This was truly a rare utmost treasure. Good, good, good. These treasures are all mine. Instead of getting angry, the overlord of levitating Goat Peak laughed. However, his smile froze on his face immediately after. A shuddering killing intent surged and descended instantly, causing his hairs to stand on end and his scalp to prickle. How could this be? That little beast still has a backup plan. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak was shocked. The two essence spirits within Su Zimo's consciousness had already fused. If the overlord of levitating Goat Peak could enter the consciousness, he would be shocked to see this. Within the consciousness, Su Zimo's essence spirit assumed a lotus position and chanted sutras. Behind him, the phantom of a gigantic Buddha appeared. It had a dignified appearance and looked down on the world with streaks of light hovering behind its head. Su Zimo and the gigantic Buddha spoke at the same time and chanted ancient sutras. Their auras seemed to have fused as one, and the Sanskrit chants reverberated through every single corner of the consciousness in a deafening manner. Su Zimo's fused essence spirit was forcefully channeling a secret skill. It was an essence spirit secret skill from the Great Day Rulai Sutra. Given Su Zimo's perception and intelligence, he had already comprehended the essence spirit secret skill within 100 years. However, the Great Day Rulai Sutra clearly recorded that the essence spirit secret skill was extremely powerful and could only be released by cultivators at the Dharma characteristic realm. Otherwise, their essence spirits would not be able to withstand it. Su Zimo's essence spirit was only at late-stage nascent soul. Even after fusing, it would only be at the void reversion realm at most. There was no way it could reach the Dharma characteristic realm. However, he could not care less. The current situation did not allow him to have any other choice. This was his only chance. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak's consciousness was affected by his destiny dharmic weapon and his essence spirit was dim. After losing his arm, his blood chi deteriorated and he was attacked repeatedly by the bronze square tripod, creation Qinglian, and even the son of Qinglian. He was at his weakest. If he could release that essence spirit secret skill at that moment, there was a high chance that it could kill the essence spirit of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak right away. Rulai Dharmic Seal. Su Zimo chanted Sanskrit and the voids trembled. A golden light shone on his glabella and a swastika symbol was formed slowly, shining with a Buddhist light that was sacred and dignified. When the ancient symbol descended, it shone with a resplendent golden light, as though it could suppress the entire world. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak's eyes widened in fear. His eyes were already completely occupied by the golden light. Against the Rulai Dharmic seal, his essence spirit in his consciousness shuddered and even had the urge to kneel down and submit. He could not imagine how a low-level fiend demon could control such a frightening secret skill. Su Zimo's essence spirit was shuddering continuously as well. Releasing the Rulai Dharmic seal was way too taxing on his essence spirit. The terrifying rate of depletion was far beyond what he could endure. All of a sudden, a wave of dizziness surged through his mind and Su Zimo's essence spirit swayed for a moment. Its glow dimmed rapidly and it was on the verge of collapse. The swastika symbol on his glabella dimmed as well. The golden light was dissipating. The terrifying might was dissipating as well. The swastika symbol trembled endlessly and turned into specks of golden light that scattered into the surroundings. The Rulai Dharmic seal was not successfully formed in the end. Su Zimo's expression was dark and disheartened. To think that he would still fail at this moment. Ha 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 ha. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak reared his head in laughter and laughed hysterically with a contorted expression. He had survived. Before he knew it, the overlord of levitating Goat Peak was already drenched in sweat. His life was hanging by a thread. He could clearly sense the terror of that essence spirit secret skill. If Mo had cultivated to the mid-level fiend demon realm, he would most likely be doomed today. However, that was not an assumption. He was not going to give Su Zimo the chance to continue growing as well. Little beast, that's your fate. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak retracted his smile and remarked coldly, it's your fate to die here. Chapter 871. Don't panic, continue condensing your spirit consciousness and release your secret skill. Suddenly, a voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind. The voice sounded familiar but he could not recall who it was for the moment. Immediately after, an extremely pure power of essence spirit surged into his consciousness and helped him stabilize the rulidermic seal that was about to dissipate. The power of essence spirit was pure and rich with a hint of heat. In the face of that power, Su Zimo's essence spirit seemed extremely insignificant. The swastika symbol on his glabella had already turned into specks of golden light that spread in all directions and was on the verge of dissipating. However, with the support of the power of essence spirit, Sanskrit sounded in Su Zimo's consciousness once more and the phantom of the gigantic Buddha materialized. The golden specks of light that were initially dissipating gathered rapidly as well, forming an ancient symbol that shone with a blinding golden light. The moment the golden symbol descended, the entire world seemed to have frozen. This rune was suffused with a terrifying aura that caused one to tremble. The void was collapsing. There was no power that could obstruct the path of the golden symbol. The rulidermic seal suppressed everything. Ah! The overlord of levitating Goat Peak shrieked with a look of disbelief. There was no way a low-level fiend demon could release an essence spirit secret skill as such. Without hesitation, the overlord of levitating Goat Peak channeled his weakened essence spirit and released an essence spirit secret skill as well, colliding with the incoming golden symbol. The two essence spirit secret skills collided in midair. However, there was no sound. The void at the point of collision distorted. Right in front of Su Zimo, the essence spirit secret skill of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak was crushed into dust by the golden symbol gently. The golden symbol merely paused in midair for a brief moment before imprinting itself on the glabella of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak and vanishing instantly. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak shuddered. The next moment, his gaze turned blank and dimmed. His expression froze and his life force dissipated rapidly. Without dermic powers to suppress the wound on his severed arm, it ruptured instantly and blood gushed out. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak collapsed stiffly. Bang! The overlord of levitating Goat Peak fell to the ground and did not move for a long time. Although his eyes were wide open, there was no light in them at all. The python tendons on Su Zimo's body seemed to have lost control and fell. Su Zimo regained his freedom and scanned the overlord of levitating Goat Peak with his consciousness. All he sensed was an aura of death without any signs of life. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat when his consciousness entered the overlord of levitating Goat Peak's consciousness. The overlord of levitating Goat Peak's consciousness was almost dried up and lifeless. His essence spirit was torn apart and was completely destroyed. An overlord had fallen. Even after he retracted his spirit consciousness from the overlord of levitating Goat Peak, Su Zimo was still shocked and had yet to recover from his shock. This was the power of an essence spirit secret technique. Although the head of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak was perfectly fine without any injuries, the essence spirit within was shattered by the rulidermic seal. Of course, this was not his power. If not for the massive surge of pure essence spirit power, he would have been the one on the ground right now. Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and tried his best to compose himself. He surveyed his surroundings and called out in a testing manner, "Senior, pick up this demon's storage bag and leave this place first." The voice sounded in Su Zimo's mind once more. It was calm and carried with it a hint of vicissitudes of life. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. At that moment, he was still not out of danger. Given the huge commotion here, Just now, the high-level fiend demons that were left behind had most likely sensed it and were speeding over. The longer he lingered here, the more dangerous it would be for him. His essence spirit had just released the rulidermic seal when his body was struck squarely by the overlord of levitating Goat Peak, and his tendons and bones were on the verge of cracking. His essence spirit and body were at their weakest. There was no need for more than a dozen high-level fiend demons, a single one of them was enough to claim his life. Su Zimo staggered and ran in front of the overlord of levitating Goat Peak, retrieving the storage bag from the latter's waist and putting it away. That was the storage bag of an overlord, and there must be a lot of good stuff inside. After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo removed a lamb leg and kept it in his storage stool. He scanned his surroundings and ran in a certain direction. As he ran, Su Zimo asked softly, "Senior, are you still there?" "Yes." "Where?" "On your body." Su Zimo was shocked and nearly fell over. This time round, the person did not send a voice transmission with his spirit consciousness, and Su Zimo could hear it clearly. The voice came from his body. To be precise, it came from his left wrist. A thought flashed through Su Zimo's mind and he vaguely guessed something. Right then, the voice suddenly sounded, "Change directions. There are 2 high-level fiend demons about 1,000 kilometers ahead." Su Zimo paused hurriedly. "Go to the left." The voice reminded him once more. Without hesitation, Su Zimo turned and sprinted to the left. However, his essence spirit and physical body were extremely weak and his movement technique was extremely slow. All of a sudden, a massive spirit consciousness burst forth from his left wrist and enveloped his body. He traveled with the wind at an extremely fast speed and vanished from the spot before long. The wind howled. Su Zimo relaxed and felt as though the trees before him were retreating continuously. The spirit consciousness led him through twists and turns, avoiding countless dangers along the way. Finally, it stopped at the entrance of a hidden cave. Su Zimo understood and burrowed in. The moment he entered the cave, Su Zimo looked at his left wrist with a delighted expression. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, he asked softly, "Senior Extreme Fire, is that you?" The moment he said that, a scarlet streak of light flew out from the Mingwang prayer beads on Su Zimo's left wrist and stood still in midair. The streak of light revealed its true appearance. It was the size of a finger and seemed to be burning with flames. Its aura was strong and its eyes were bright as it looked at Su Zimo with a smile. That essence spirit was the Hakka Dojin that Su Zimo met more than 100 years ago at the bottom of the cold lake of Tsang Lang mountain range. Back then, the Hakka Dojin was poisoned and was on the brink of death. He was trapped under the cold lake and could not move at all for 5,000 years. In the end, Su Zimo finally left him some things and instructed him before letting go of his final will to live and leaving. It could be said that the legacy of the Hakka Dojin back then was of great help to Su Zimo for him to achieve his later accomplishments. Everything else aside, the night spirit was given to him by the Hakka Dojin. Later on, the Hakka Dojin's essence spirit was poisoned and lost all signs of life. The Mingwang prayer beads in Su Zimo's hand produced some warmth. Under his probing, the Hakka Dojin's essence spirit turned into a stream of light and was sucked into the Mingwang prayer beads. After that, there was no movement. Although Su Zimo had cultivated to the nascent soul realm, he was still unable to truly refine the Mingwang prayer beads. His spirit consciousness could not enter them either, and naturally, he did not know what was going on inside. To think that the Hakka Dojin would come back from the dead and save his life at this critical juncture. Chapter 872. Senior, how did you? Although Su Zimo was delighted to see Hakka Dojin come back to life, he still had many doubts in his heart. How was the poison in Hakka Dojin's body purged? When did he wake up? Was he fully recovered by now? As though he could tell the confusion in Su Zimo's heart, Hakka Dojin smiled gently. Rest and recuperate first. I'll tell you slowly. Su Zimo nodded and pondered for a moment. He took out just now's gigantic lamb leg from his storage bag and smiled. Just have a roasted lamb leg. He was not being greedy. The lamb leg in his hands was the flesh of an overlord and was extremely nourishing. Coupled with Su Zimo's frightening recovery capabilities, his injuries would be mostly healed as long as he absorbed all the energy within the overlord's flesh. At nascent soul realm, demons could absorb the essence of heaven and earth and the sun and moon. At the same time, cultivators could live on clouds and dew without consuming grains, reaching a true state of anedia. However, the lamb leg was not only nourishing, it was also a rare delicacy. There was naturally no way Su Zimo would let it go. Su Zimo took out the bronze square tripod and channeled his spirit consciousness to conjure a ball of flames. He tossed it into the tripod and placed the lamb leg on top. Before long, the cave was filled with the aroma of roasted meat. Su Zimo reached out and tore off a piece. Without fear of scalding his hands, he popped it into his mouth and chewed. All the essence and blood chi entered his stomach and flowed through his limbs. Haka Adojin only had an essence spirit and did not have a physical body. Naturally, he could not enjoy it. Looking at the flames in the bronze square tripod, Haka Adojin seemed to have thought of something. He looked at Su Zimo's right hand with a hint of wariness in his eyes. Haka Adojin asked, "Your right hand should be the divine phoenix bone, right?" "Yes," Su Zimo nodded and did not hide anything. Haka Adojin said sternly, "Just now, the divine phoenix bone has been stimulated and released a terrifying power that has already reached the conjoint body realm." Su Zimo was shocked. The conjoint body realm was almost the strongest existence in Tianhuang mainland. Conjoint body cultivators were known as mighty figures and every single move they made possessed the might of heaven and earth. Unfortunately, with his current cultivation, he was still unable to activate the power of the divine phoenix bone. The divine phoenix bone was a trump card that could only be used unexpectedly, and with the stimulation of the opponent's strength, it could only have a shocking effect and was rather passive. "Don't worry." Haka Adojin comforted her. "Since this divine bone is in your body, there will be a day when you can control the power within it." Haka Adojin looked at Su Zimo and recalled the scene when they first met, feeling rather emotional. To think that after more than 100 years, that young man from back then would have already come this far. Haka Adojin looked into the distance with a reminiscing expression and said slowly, "Actually, the reason why I'm still alive is all thanks to the Mingwang prayer beads in your hands." The Mingwang prayer beads are indeed worthy of being the ultimate treasure of Daming Monastery. They truly have the ability to defy the heavens and change fate, bringing the dead back to life. Haka Adojin said, "The Mingwang prayer beads are made from the core of the soul-nourishing wood, an immortal wood of Tianhuang mainland. They can nourish the soul and essence spirit with miraculous effects. My primordial spirit was tainted with that kind of poison, and I should have died without a doubt. To think that after entering this prayer bead, my essence spirit was nourished and my life was saved." At the mention of that, Haka Adojin sighed emotionally. Su Zimo looked at the Mingwang prayer beads on his left wrist and recalled the past as well. At that time, he was still a Foundation establishment cultivator and entered the inheritance ground of the Fiend's sex with Demoness Ji to fight against the Fiend heir. To think that something unexpected would happen later on. A skeleton crawled out of the ancient coffin in the blood pool and nearly killed all of them within. He and Demoness Ji hid in the stone coffin where the skeleton was buried and fell into the underground river, escaping with their lives. He was the one who discovered the Mingwang prayer beads in the stone coffin. Suddenly, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat. The old monk at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley had once told him about the reason why the Mingwang prayer beads were lost. Tens of thousands of years ago, two paragons, the blood demon Dao Lord and monk Daming, went missing in the end. Their whereabouts were unknown and their fates were unknown. As a result, the Mingwang prayer beads were lost as well. Later on, Daming Monastery recovered 3 of them and the remaining 3 were lost outside. One of them was the one that Su Zimo obtained from the stone coffin. There was an extremely evil cultivation technique recorded in that stone coffin, the Blood Refinement Fiend's Sutra. Later on, the skeleton that crawled out of the stone coffin devoured the flesh of many living beings in an extremely domineering manner, and the cultivation technique it used was the Blood Refinement Fiend's Sutra. If that was the case, then the identity of this skeleton would be revealed. The Blood Demon Tao Lord. This fiend that massacred the world tens of thousands of years ago had not truly died. In fact, there was a high chance that he was alive. It was not hard to imagine that after the shocking battle against Monk Daming, the Blood Demon Tao Lord was defeated and severely injured. His essence spirit entered the Mingwang prayer beads to be nourished slowly. The reason why he was able to survive to this lifetime was probably because of the Mingwang prayer beads as well. That was also the reason why Su Zimo was able to find the Buddha beads in the stone coffin. At that thought, the Blood Refinement Fiend's Sutra on the coffin lid should have been carved by him as well. Everything seemed to have made sense. However, Su Zimo was still confused. For example, how did the Mingwang prayer beads end up in the stone coffin? Was it truly a coincidence? Also, when they first saw the stone coffin, there were gigantic chains coiled around it. Who left those chains behind? The purpose of those chains was clearly to trap the Blood Demon Tao Lord to death. However, why would the Mingwang prayer beads be left in the stone coffin? Or rather, why didn't the cultivator who left those chains kill the Blood Demon Tao Lord directly? Hakka Dojin naturally did not know what Su Zimo was thinking. He continued, the first time I woke up was at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Su Zimo was slightly stunned. He did not expect Hakka Dojin to wake up so early. Although my essence spirit was nourished after entering the soul-nourishing wood, the poison in my body was not purged and I was merely unconscious. Hakka Dojin continued, it was the old monk at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley who helped me purge the poison from my body. When he heard that, Su Zimo was enlightened. Back at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, when the old monk received his Mingwang prayer beads, he exclaimed softly, as though he sensed something. At that time, he asked the old monk, but the old monk did not explain in detail. Now that he thought about it, the old monk must have discovered Hakka Dojin back then and saved him in passing. Hakka Dojin said, although I've awakened, my essence spirit has been entangled by poison for many years and is still extremely weak. I don't have much strength left and can't help you much. Over the years, I've watched you fight your way through the battlefield. You've done well. You have not tarnished the reputation of the human race in Myriad Phenomenon City. Su Zimo recalled that battle and shook his head gently with a forlorn expression. Although I won that battle, my demon form was witnessed by countless cultivators. The cultivation world might not tolerate me. You don't have to worry, Hakka Dojin said in a deep voice, let's not talk about the other sections. I can make the decision for 100 Refinement Sect to clear your name and protect your safety. Chapter 873. Hakka Dojin's words were forceful and bold. He did not take Su Zimo's demonic cultivation to heart at all. Neither did he take into account the major sects and factions that had a feud with Su Zimo. Su Zimo was touched and thanked hurriedly. At that moment, he had yet to realize the weight of Hakka Dojin's words. He did not know what sort of a figure Hakka Dojin was in the cultivation world 5,000 years ago either. After all, in Su Zimo's opinion, no matter how strong Hakka Dojin was, he was merely the Dharma Dao Jun. His cultivation realm was comparable to the old immortal crane of Misty Peak and he could not protect Su Zimo at all. Back then, during the Battle of Misty Peak, the old immortal crane broke through to become a high-level fiend demon before she passed away and was equivalent to the Dharma Dao Jun. However, Misty Peak was still insignificant against a colossus like Glass Palace. Notwithstanding Glass Palace, Misty Peak did not have any status or right to speak before the 10 upper sects of the North region. Back then, Su Zimo had no choice but to leave the North region. In the Battle of the Great Qian Ruins, he had offended almost all the 10 upper sects and aristocratic families of the North region. If he were to stay in the north region, Misty Peak would definitely do their best to protect him. If that was the case, Misty Peak would definitely be met with a calamity. Instantly, they would be reduced to ashes and their legacy would be lost forever, erased from the cultivation world. However, Su Zimo did not know that 100 Refinement sect was not Misty Peak. As for Haka-Dojin, he was not the old immortal crane either. When Su Zimo saw that the aura of Haka-Dojin's essence spirit was strong and seemed to have recovered to the Dharma characteristic realm, he asked, "Senior, have you recovered your cultivation?" "Not yet. I've barely recovered 70 to 80%. Haka-Dojin smiled and said, "Originally, it would take me at least a few hundred years to recover my cultivation. I didn't expect that I would also benefit from your opportunity. Just now." Su Zimo stared blankly for a moment, then immediately understood. It was no wonder that he had felt a suction force from his wrist in the 1,000-year blood sea. However, when he released the Blood Refinement Fiend Sutra and was surrounded by the young master of Levitating Goat Peak and the other 5, he almost went berserk and did not think too much about it. He did not expect that the energy accumulated in the blood ocean for 1,000 years would not only boost his cultivation but also help Haka-Dojin. Actually, the energy that was originally deposited in the blood sea was not enough for me to recover my cultivation. Haka-Dojin replied. However, 7 high-level fiend demons entered the blood sea later on and died mysteriously, causing the energy within the blood sea to surge. That was how I obtained enough energy. The reason why I did not attack you during your escape was because I was digesting the massive energy within the blood sea. That overlord was extremely strong. If I hadn't recovered 70 to 80% of my combat strength, it would have been difficult for me to kill him. That was the reason why I did not attack recklessly. At that point, Haka-Dojin shook his head gently and lamented, "You're way too gutsy. You're at the nascent soul realm and yet, you wanted to kill an overlord that was 2 major cultivation realms above you. Truly." Su Zimo felt a lingering fear when he recalled what happened. An overlord was far stronger than he had imagined. He had released all his trump cards and caught the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak by surprise with the Divine Phoenix Claw. However, he was still unable to kill the overlord of Levitating Goat Peak. If not for Haka-Dojin, he would have been dead. Although he had benefited immensely from this trip to the Blood Sea, it was truly perilous as well. Not only was he hunted down by an overlord, there seemed to be some unknown danger within that sinister blood sea as well. 7 high-level fiend demons died mysteriously and were killed instantly by a bubble that floated from the bottom of the sea, destroying their essence spirits. Was it really just a coincidence that the seemingly harmless bubble brushed past him? Su Zimo still felt a lingering fear when he recalled that scene. "Senior, that blood sea," the moment Su Zimo spoke, Haka-Dojin's expression changed and he interrupted, "Don't return to that place. There's definitely something extremely terrifying in the depths of that blood sea." Haka-Dojin said sternly. If even Haka-Dojin was like that, Su Zimo realized that the secret of the blood sea was definitely not something that he could come into contact with given his cultivation realm. After a moment of silence, Su Zimo looked at Haka-Dojin with a worried look in his eyes as he asked softly, "Senior, what about your body?" Although one would lose their bodies after cultivating to the void reversion and dharma characteristic realm, they would not die. However, their combat strength would decrease sharply without their bodies and they would not be able to release many dharmic arts. Furthermore, without the protection of their bodies, their essence spirits would become extremely fragile when exposed. It was akin to a person without the protection of a spirit vessel floating in a treacherous sea that was filled with danger and could die at any moment. There were 2 ways to obtain a body. The first was through possession. However, the conditions for possession were harsh and the cultivation realm of the person being possessed could not be too low. The process of possession was extremely dangerous and one could easily be devoured if they were not careful. Furthermore, every cultivator could only possess a body once in their lifetime. The second was to obtain a perfectly preserved dharma characteristic body. That was not easy to do as well. What sort of people were Dharma Daojun? It was extremely difficult to obtain their bodies. Furthermore, it was a perfectly preserved Dharma characteristic body. The greatest possibility was that a Dharma characteristic cultivator was killed by an essence spirit secret skill. That was the reason why their bodies were intact but their essence spirits were destroyed. When he heard Suzumo's question, Haka-dojin swept his gaze towards Suzumo and asked with a fake smile, "Aren't you worried that I'll possess you?" Suzumo was stunned for a moment before shaking his head. Back in Song Lang mountain range, Haka-dojin had saved his life. Just now, Haka-dojin had saved him once more. Suzumo did not believe that Haka-dojin would possess him. Haka-dojin had a strange expression and his tone suddenly turned sinister as he said coldly, "Although the difference in our cultivation realms is too great, your body and bloodline can be said to be perfect and unparalleled. If you possess my body, it's definitely a win-win situation for me. As long as I cultivate a little, I'll be able to recover to my original state and my combat strength will be even greater than before." Suzumo laughed involuntarily and shook his head again. When Haka-dojin saw how certain Suzumo was, he no longer tried to scare the latter and his expression returned to normal. "I'm heartened that you can trust me. However, I still have to remind you. Your body can be said to be extremely terrifying at this point of your cultivation. There's no cultivator in the world who isn't tempted, including me." The fact that Haka-dojin could say that was already considered as a sincere gesture. Haka-dojin continued, "In the cultivation world, the strong preys on the weak and it's extremely cruel. I won't possess you, but that doesn't mean that other cultivators won't do the same. Although I've saved you before, there's a high chance that I have other motives. You have to be careful in the future and not trust others easily." Suzumo nodded. In reality, the reason why Suzumo was so certain was not only because Haka-dojin had saved him before. It was also because of his spirit perception. After cultivating the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, Dayu forced him to survive in Song Lang mountain range. Countless bloody battles and countless close shaves of life and death had honed a unique sense of danger that was unpredictable. That was Suzumo's greatest reliance. Through his spirit perception, he could not sense any killing intent from Haka-dojin towards him. Chapter 874. At the end of the day, possession isn't the right path and I don't want to do it either. Haka-dojin's tone was calm but there was an indescribable pride in it. If it was any ordinary cultivator who lost their physical body, they would most likely resort to unscrupulous means. Be it possession or other methods, it would be fine as long as they could obtain a physical body. However, that was not the case for Haka-dojin. Although he lost his physical body, he did not lose the pride in his heart. Suzumo said, "If I give up on possession, there's only one way left. However, I don't know where I can find a Dharma characteristic body." Suzumo's heart skipped a beat. There should be quite a number of situations like yours, senior. Are there cultivators who sell Dharma characteristic bodies? He had not cultivated to the Dharma characteristic realm and could not come into contact with that level. However, in his opinion, since there was a demand, there was a high chance that someone would sell it. Furthermore, this was a huge business that could not be underestimated. Haka-dojin nodded. "You're smart. There are indeed businesses that sell the bodies of cultivators in the cultivation world. Initially, Tomb Sect was the only one in this industry. Later on, corpse refinement cult got involved as well." "Tomb Sect?" Suzumo said in a low voice, "I do have a friend from Tomb Sect. If I can meet him, I can help you ask about it. However, that person's cultivation realm should be similar to mine and he might not be able to obtain a Dharma characteristic body." "There's no need for that," Haka-dojin shook his head. "I don't care about possession nor do I want to possess an unfamiliar body for myself. Even if I recover to my original state, I won't be Haka-dojin anymore." Suzumo nodded. Even if their essence spirits were the same, there would still be differences. Furthermore, these two methods both have the same drawbacks. Haka Dojin continued, be it possession or trade for a dharma characteristic body, it's not your own bloodline and doesn't come from the same source as your essence spirit. As such, it'll be difficult for you to recover to your previous peak. Su Zimo roughly understood. No matter what, losing a physical body was an irreversible loss. Haka Dojin said solemnly, actually, there is a third way besides these two methods. Gather heavenly materials and earthly treasures, forge bones, and reforge the body. Reforge the bones and reforge the body. Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat when he heard those words. What kind of method was this? Haka Dojin explained, in fact, this is an ancient refining method. With the bones as the foundation and the internal organs as supplements, the bloodline will be nurtured and the body will be reconstructed. This method sounds simple, but the process is extremely complicated. The better your bones are, the more powerful your bloodline will be. The stronger the organs are, the more terrifying the overall strength of the body will be. Haka Dojin explained everything in great detail. As for Su Zimo, he had an extremely profound understanding of the Tao of refining, so he was also fascinated by it. Unknowingly, 2 hours had passed and the sky was starting to brighten. Logically speaking, this ancient method of forging bones and body was definitely a secret skill of 100 refinement sect that was not passed down. However, for some reason, Su Zimo had a feeling that Haka Dojin seemed to have the intention of imparting this ancient technique. Furthermore, he was afraid that Su Zimo would not understand and explained it in detail. At that moment, Su Zimo could not understand. Not long after, he finally understood Haka Dojin's intentions. If one wanted to reforge their bones and obtain the most ideal body, the most important thing was heavenly materials. The higher the quality of the materials used to refine the bones, the higher the quality of the body. According to Haka Dojin, if the spirit materials used to refine bones were all khanate treasures, there was a high chance that a khanate bone would be created. The so-called khanate bone was comparable to a khanate dermic weapon. As for the bloodline and body nourished by the khanate bone, it would be a khanate Tao body. Of course, this was only an ideal situation and was unrealistic. Since ancient times, no one had ever succeeded. What do you plan to do next? After explaining the method of forging bones and body, Haka Dojin asked. I still have to go back and check on my brothers. Su Zimo said in a deep voice, if they're fine, tell them that I'll leave 1000 Demon Valley first and send you back to 100 Refinement Sect, Senior. He had been in 1000 Demon Valley for 100 years. He did not know how the cultivation world was like in the past 100 years. Of course, Su Zimo was more concerned about his old friends in the cultivation world, as well as Xiaoning and Night Spirit. It was time to return. Su Zimo continued, Senior, don't worry. I'll do my best to help you find the 9 most important materials for forging bones and body. Haka Dojin was good at using fire techniques to begin with. Therefore, it would be best if the heavenly materials he needed to refine his bones were the 9 strongest fire attribute materials in Tianhuang mainland. Of course, those materials were extremely rare and difficult to find. It was even harder than ascending to the heavens to gather all 9. In that short period of time, Su Zimo had already finished the lamb leg completely, leaving only a bone stick. The injuries on his body had also mostly recovered. It's not appropriate for my essence spirit to be exposed outside. It's better for me to hide in the Mingwang prayer beads first. After saying that, Haka Dojin's essence spirit transformed into a fiery streak of light and disappeared into Su Zimo's left wrist. Su Zimo tidied his clothes and walked out of the cave. More than 2 hours had passed and the high-level fiend demon that was chasing after him must have left long ago. I wonder how the battle near the Blood Sea turned out, Su Zimo murmured softly and surveyed his surroundings. After determining the direction, he decided to return to the vicinity of the Blood Sea to investigate. Right then, Su Zimo's expression changed. A sense of trepidation surged without warning and the entire world went silent, as though something major was about to happen. The forest was filled with a murderous aura. Su Zimo felt a tightness in his chest that made it hard for him to breathe. Danger seemed to be everywhere. The most frightening thing was that his spirit perception was useless now. The murderous aura in the forest had already engulfed his spirit perception. This was an extremely rare situation. Right then, as though he sensed something, Su Zimo raised his head and looked over. Ah! Su Zimo was shocked and exclaimed. At the end of the horizon not too far away, numerous ancient stars had actually floated up into appearance in the sky, and they were slowly revolving and moving in all directions with chaotic trajectories. Stars in daytime. That universal phenomenon had appeared once more. This time round, it was extremely close to Su Zimo. The stars in the firmaments could not help but collide with each other in the midst of their chaotic movements, letting out a series of deafening booms. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled. In the midst of the collisions, countless rocks fell from the ancient stars and burned with flames, descending on Tianhuang mainland almost like a rain of fire. Bang! 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 The earth quaked and the mountains swayed, as though the heavens were about to destroy this world. It was way too shocking. Furthermore, it was happening right before Su Zimo's eyes. The stars seemed to be hovering above his head, emitting a terrifying might as they revolved, collided and rubbed against each other. A murderous aura filled the world. Instantly, it was as though all the living beings in Thousand Demon Valley were scared out of their wits. Normally speaking, the stars in the firmaments would have their own orbits. They would not rub against each other, let alone collide with each other. However, at that moment, the stars in the skies were completely chaotic, as though they were driven by an invisible force to wreak havoc and destroy all living beings. Could it be? Right then, Hakka Dojin's voice sounded. A fiery red stream of light floated out from the Mingwang prayer beads and Hakka Dojin appeared once more. He looked up at the skies with a shocked expression and disbelief in his eyes. Chapter 875. The appearance of stars in daytime was a universal phenomenon that had appeared once before the Thousand Demon meet. Even the old ape did not know the reason for it. But now, it was clear that Hakka Dojin had noticed something from his expression. Su Zimo could not help but ask, "Senior, is there any explanation for such a universal phenomenon? Make a move first." "I'll tell you along the way." Hakka Dojin's essence spirit transformed into a scarlet streak of light and entered the Mingwang prayer beads once more. Su Zimo could tell that Hakka Dojin's voice seemed to be trembling. He knew that a universal phenomenon as such was definitely not simple. Su Zimo raised his head and looked at the direction beneath the firmaments. That was extremely close to the thousand-year blood sea, and there was a chance that he would bump into Monkey and the others if he rushed over now. Without hesitation, Su Zimo sped forward in a flash. A moment later, Hakka Dojin's voice sounded, as though he had composed himself. "If I'm not wrong, this universal phenomenon means that an ancient sword art is about to appear." "Ancient sword art?" Su Zimo murmured softly. What sort of sword art could cause such a huge commotion and even trigger a universal phenomenon the moment it was born? Hakka Dojin said in a deep voice, "In the ancient era, there were 3 great sword arts in the cultivation world that were the most lethal. The birth of every single one of them would be accompanied by a universal phenomenon. The 3 great ancient sword arts are the heaven-slaying sword art, earth-slaying sword art and man-slaying sword art." Su Zimo exclaimed softly and probed, "The 3 great sword arts sound like they're related in some way." "You're right," Hakka Dojin said. "Legend has it that in the primordial era before the ancient era, the 3 great sword arts were originally one. They were terrifying in terms of killing and were the #1 killing skill of the primordial era. In fact, they could even slay immortals and fiend gods. That was also the reason why the killing power of this sword manual was too great and was tainted by karma, causing it to be split into 3. They were the 3 great sword arts of the ancient era later on." Su Zimo was shocked. This sword codex was split into 3 parts, but it was still able to become one of the 3 great ancient sword techniques and cause a phenomenon in the world. It was hard to imagine the original power of this sword codex. These are all ancient secrets. Originally, I didn't have access to them. Haka-Dojin continued, but 5,000 years ago, I accidentally entered an ancient ruin. In that ruin, I once saw records and legends about this matter. Suzumo suddenly understood. Back then, when the two of them had first met in the depths of the cold lake in Sanglang mountain range, Haka-Dojin had told him that he had barged into a relic and was injured by the lifeforms in the relic. He had been poisoned and had almost died on the spot. It turned out that the ruins were actually ruins from the primeval times. If that was the case, the night spirit was brought out from the ancient ruins by Haka-Dojin, and the night spirit could very well be a life form from the ancient times. It was no wonder why Suzumo could not find any records of the night spirit even after searching through the ancient books of Misty Peak. Most of the life forms of the primeval times had already gone extinct without leaving any traces behind. Even the super sects of the cultivation world might not have any records of it, let alone Misty Peak. At most, they would only have a few words. At the mention of the primeval ruin, Haka-Dojin's emotions fluctuated once more. It was as though he still had lingering fears when he recalled that experience. Suzumo changed the topic and asked, Heaven, Earth and human slaying sword arts. Out of the 3 great sword arts, it sounds like the human slaying sword art is the weakest. You're wrong. Haka-Dojin shook his head. Out of the 3 great sword arts, the human slaying sword art is the strongest. Legend has it that the power of the human slaying sword art has already reached the level of a divine power. Suzumo's heart skipped a beat. The divine powers that Haka-Dojin was referring to were not innate divine powers comprehended by fiend demons after they cultivated to high-level fiend demons. Instead, they were divine powers comprehended by cultivators after they cultivated to the Mahayana realm and became patriarchs. The human slaying sword art possessed the power of the Mahayana realm. Haka-Dojin said softly, there were 3 sentences recorded in the primeval ruin regarding the 3 great sword arts. When the heavens release killing intent, the stars shift. When the earth releases killing intent, dragons and serpents rise. When the humans release killing intent, the heavens and earth topple. Suzumo looked at the chaotic constellations in the firmaments and was enlightened as he whispered, the heaven-slaying sword art has appeared this time round. That's right. Haka-Dojin said, you must obtain that sword art. If you can comprehend it, your combat strength will definitely increase exponentially. Suzumo frowned slightly. The commotion here is so huge and the overlords of the various factions are holding 1,000 demon meat nearby. I'm afraid they've already rushed over. It's going to be difficult to obtain the heaven-slaying sword art under the noses of the overlords and countless fiend demons. Suzumo knew very well that it was unrealistic for him to fight for the heaven-slaying sword art against the overlords and fiend demons given his current strength. Right now, he had Haka-Dojin's help. However, Haka-Dojin had lost his physical body and his combat strength was limited. There was no way he could fight against the overlords with just his essence spirit. It's fine, Haka-Dojin said, don't forget, the fiend demons of Thousand Demon Valley shouldn't know the significance of the stars in daytime. This is your chance. Suzumo's heart skipped a beat and he nodded to himself. In this short period of time, he had already arrived beneath the firmaments and there was already a thick blood stench drifting over from the front. He did not know how many living beings had died. After sprinting for a while, he could see that there were hundreds of gigantic fiendish demons clashing in midair. Roar! Roar! The roars of the fiend demons shook the world. Even the space in the battlefield in midair was distorted. This was a massive battle between high-level fiend demons. Among them, 6 massive figures were the most eye-catching. Their auras were powerful and swept through the 9 heavens. Each time they attacked, the voids would tremble. There was an old ape that was more than 100 feet tall and stood upright. His fur was grayish-white and he looked like he was in his twilight years. However, his gaze was blazing and he wielded a long rod that shone with a blinding golden light. He was invincible. Beside him, a bull that was burning with golden flames wielded a black trident and rampaged through the demons with an unstoppable sharpness. The combined combat strength of the two overlords was torrential, and it was clear that they were suppressing the overlords of Silvermoon Valley, Thousand Snake Island, Confusion Mist Swamp and Vermilion Cloud Valley. Su Zimo's gaze shifted and he gasped slightly when he looked down. Beneath the 6 overlords, the ground cracked and gigantic cracks appeared one after another. It was a frightening sight and emitted a dark and sinister black wind. The ground was protruding slowly. It was as though there was an unknown massive being that was about to crawl out from the depths of the ground. Crack! 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 As time passed by, the protrusion of the ground increased and the cracks increased as well. Countless fiend demons stood at the periphery, not daring to advance at all. An unknown period of time passed. All of a sudden, the entire world seemed to have gone silent. The next moment, the ground exploded and mud rumbled like a volcano erupting. One after another, resplendent beams of light shot out. Instantly, divine light filled the skies and spread into the surroundings. Chapter 876. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Divine rainbows tore through the air and shone in all directions. Although Su Zimo stood far away, his eyesight was strong and he could not help but freeze on the spot when he focused his gaze. The rays of light were dermic weapons. There were long nails, bone sabers, flying swords, and even bronze cauldrons. There were many different types. Exclamation point. A fiend demon was caught off guard and his body was penetrated by a ray of light. Instantly, a bloody hole appeared on his body and blood gushed out as he cried out tragically. Another fiend demon channeled a dermic art and demonic chi rumbled, suppressing a ray of light. Upon closer inspection, his eyes lit up. The ray of light was a flying sword. A Dao being dermic weapon. Furthermore, there were 5 dermic patterns etched on it. It was a perfect grade Dao being dermic weapon. A dermic weapon of this quality was extremely rare even in the cultivation world, let alone the world of demons. Ha 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 ha. Wielding the flying sword, the demon was beside himself with joy and reared his head in laughter. Poof! His laughter stopped abruptly. The fiend demon's head was pierced by a poison needle and his face turned ashen in the blink of an eye. His essence spirit was poisoned and could not escape from his body, dying on the spot. A woman from Thousand Snake Island picked up the perfect grade Dao being dermic weapon and fled rapidly. When the other fiend demons saw that, they soared into the air one after another and used their various methods to capture the divine rainbows in midair. Mine is a perfect grade dermic weapon too. Ah, it's a supreme grade dermic weapon. You must have a death wish. How dare you steal my dermic weapon? The cries of the demons sounded one after another and fights were everywhere. Some fiend demons would be surrounded and killed by other fiend demons the moment they obtained a dermic weapon, and their dermic weapons would be snatched away as well. Chi! A divine rainbow tore through the air and sped towards Su Zimo's direction, arriving in the blink of an eye. Su Zimo's expression changed and he reached out to grab the divine rainbow. It was not a dermic weapon but a scarlet stone that emitted an incomparably scorching aura. Furthermore, the divine phoenix bone in Su Zimo's right palm seemed to have a reaction as well. What's that? Su Zimo looked at it from top to bottom but could not make out anything. Wait! Haka Dojin's voice rang out, this is the crimson phoenix blood gold, a heavenly material of extreme yang and extreme fire in the cultivation world. Quickly put it away. If Haka Dojin wanted to forge his ideal skeleton, he would need 9 types of heavenly materials that were of extreme yang and extreme fire. The crimson phoenix blood gold was one of them. Legend had it that the crimson phoenix blood gold was a stone that had been soaked in the blood of the divine phoenix. It would take tens of thousands of years for it to finally take shape. One could imagine how rare it was. Even if one had the money, one might not be able to buy such a heavenly treasure in the market square of the cultivation world. Su Zimo did not expect to find one in the myriad demon valley. Back then, he had obtained many dragon veins in the astral dragon sputum lair of the primordial battlefield. With providence on his body, he must have had a lot of influence. Hand over the treasure. Right at this moment, the sound of clothes fluttering through the air rang out. There were actually 7 fiend demons that chased after the divine rainbow released by the scarlet phoenix blood gold. Su Zimo swept his gaze and could not help but sneer internally when he sensed that the 7 of them were mid-level fiend demons. With a flip of his palm, he put away the scarlet phoenix blood gold. You must have a death wish. What's the treasure that you're hiding just now? A fiend demon closed in and pointed at Su Zimo with a murderous expression, hollering. The other fiend demons surrounded Su Zimo swiftly with hostile expressions. Before long, a fiend demon's expression changed with disbelief. He pointed at Su Zimo and asked with a trembling voice, why you're mo? You're not dead? Previously, all the demons witnessed how the overlord of levitating goat Peak chased after Su Zimo using blood escape. In the eyes of the demons, Su Zimo was definitely dead if he was targeted by an overlord. However, to think that Su Zimo would return alive. When they heard the words Mo, the remaining fiend demons were shocked and retreated hurriedly. The fiend demon of levitating goat Peak at the front was the only one who did not move at all. Instead, he looked at the other fiend demons mockingly and shouted, "How can a low-level fiend demon scare you guys to such an extent? How embarrassing. Brother Yang, you came a little late and did not see what that demon was capable of," a fiend demon reminded hurriedly. Unexpectedly, the fiend demon of levitating goat Peak interrupted with a scoff. What can a low-level fiend demon do? If he doesn't hand over that treasure today, what do you want? A calm and cold voice sounded in the ears of the fiend demon of levitating goat Peak. Psst. The fiend demon of levitating goat Peak gasped. Unknowingly, Su Zimo had already arrived before him. It was way too fast. The fiend demon of levitating goat Peak did not hesitate and wanted to conjure his essence spirit secret skill right away. Unexpectedly, Su Zimo hollered, "Scram!" His voice was thunderous. The fiend demon of levitating goat Peak shuddered and paused for a moment before he could conjure his essence spirit secret skill. In that instant, Su Zimo had already advanced and slapped the top of the demon's head casually. Piak! The top of this demon's head shattered, and the primordial spirit inside was instantly shattered into pieces. Su Zimo did not stop at all and had already sped away. By the time the remaining fiend demons reacted to what happened, they could only see a departing back view. Why are there so many magical artifacts bursting out? Just what is buried underground? Su Zimo murmured softly. This time round, even the Hakka Dojin did not reply, as though he was rather puzzled by what happened. Boom! Right then, the ground quaked once more. The earth quaked. The ground that had already protruded exploded completely and sinister chi rumbled, revealing a gigantic burial ground beneath. Countless corpses were piled up within. After an unknown period of time, the flesh on the corpses had already withered. Even his storage bag had been shattered. Countless dermic weapons and weapons were scattered among the corpses. Most of them were dim without light and only a few emitted a faint glow. There was a gigantic burial ground beneath the ground. Looking at the thick skeletons in the burial ground, it could be deduced that most of the people who died here were demons. No one knew what happened in the past that caused countless demons to be buried in the burial ground. Corpses were strewn everywhere and the surrounding ground was dyed blood red in a frightening manner. In midair, the high-level fiend demons and overlords that were initially fighting stopped as well. They looked down at the burial ground with grim expressions and their gazes flickered in bewilderment. Suddenly, the old ape reached out and grabbed a blood-red stone from the edge of the burial ground. It was scarlet and gave off a strong stench of blood. That's the 10,000 demon blood crystal. The Hakadojin's voice sounded in Suzumo's mind with a hint of shock. There are at least tens of millions of demons buried in this burial ground for a 10,000 demon blood crystal to be formed. The blood of tens of millions of demons is required to create a single 10,000 demon blood crystal. Suzumo's heart skipped a beat when he heard that. This was a 10,000 demon pit where tens of millions of demons were buried in the past. The sinister chi was torrential and was almost corporeal. It was only now that it saw the light of day once more. The stars above the firmaments turned even more chaotic. The stars in the skies flickered as though they were about to crash down. A murderous aura spread through the demon burial ground. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.